Planning Board and Zoning Commission to order. Mr. Henry, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Scributinus? Here. Mr. Laflamme?
Here.
Mr. McPartlin?
Here.
Mr. Darpino?
Here.
Mr. Oster?
Here.
Chairman Walsh?
Here. Okay, we have the approval. Oh, did we miss anybody?
Yeah.
Ms. Shenfield?
Ms. Shenfield here.
I'm sorry, Ms. Shenfield.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Okay, we have the approval of the minutes from the November 18th, 2019 meeting that were included in your packet. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, moved by Mr. McPartlin, and I will second that. And I do have a few comments for discussion, just some minor things, okay? And I'd like to start with, see, page 5, line 171. That line is, I think it's just cut and paste that, and the resolution was approved 7-0. Just strike that line, please. Okay, the resolution passed 4-3, like stated above. All right, and then on page 6, I think there was a minor, okay, just a minor thing. Line 209. Today in thought, the site looked easily accessible. That's SITE site, okay? And then the other thing was about people present. We include any of the town employees that are here acting in capacity to serve the planning board. I know that Mr. Henry ran the meeting, and Linda, you were here, Ms. Schetti, and Mr. Briggs was also in attendance for the meeting. So should we add those 3 names to the also present for the record?
Yep, I think that's really fine.
Okay, and that's all I had. Does anybody else have any other changes at all?
Mr. Chairman, I was having a little trouble tracking the roll call for the first resolution. On
Page
line
5.
171.
Yep. Yep.
It wasn't clear to me,
Yeah,
the vote count doesn't match the approval numbers.
okay, 1, 2.
I think maybe we just need to strike line 171.
Yeah, that's what I was saying first. We got to strike line 7. That was my first comment.
You
Yep.
mentioned that. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
line 71, it passed 4-3. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 ayes and 3 nays. And that was just like probably a copy and paste error, right? For the resolution was approved 7-0.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything else?
On line 20, I think it's just a clerical, should be 2 sets of minutes, not on minutes.
Oh, yeah. I missed one. I'm not doing my job. Yeah.
And then on line 101, page 3, I thought it was Attorney Kim who commented on whether the CBD, whether selling it so close to the high school. I couldn't remember, though. I thought it was Ms. Kim who commented on it, but maybe not.
Yeah, and I don't recall.
I mean, if you feel strongly, like, I don't recall either, we can just put Ms. Kim into the minutes. Yeah. So we'll just change Ms. Robertson to Ms. Kim.
Or is it Ms. Shenfield? Was that the one? What line was that?
Yep, it was 101.
Oh, 101.
Just
Okay, sorry.
changing Ms.
Gotcha.
Robertson to Ms. Kim.
Okay. All right, I consider those just minor fixes. So maybe we'll have a vote on the minutes as amended unless there's no other changes. All right, all those in favor of passing the minutes as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. The minutes are unanimously approved. Thank you,
And
everybody.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't here, so I'll abstain.
Okay, and Mr. Scributinus will abstain since he wasn't here, okay? So that'd be 6 in favor, 1 abstention, Mr. Scributinus. Thank you. Okay, we have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move right to privilege of the floor. On the privilege of the floor, we'll listen to what you have to say regarding any planning and zoning matters in the town of Niskuna. So please come to state your name and address for record, and I just say that, we're here to listen. We won't be getting any exchange. If there's any comments, we'll make sure we take note of them, and during any of the working discussions, we'll try to address any comments that we hear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my name is Douglas McFadden. I live at 1388 Row Road in Niskuna. Been there about 34 years. We are concerned about what we've seen that Mr. Lisi's intending to build 3 more houses, plus he's talking about some kind of an 11-acre preserve, all in this 17-plus acre facility. So we wanted to know a couple of things. The size of these houses. The one house that has been built is 4,000 square feet, which is a good-sized home. We're presuming that those next 3 will be the same size. That's going to bring about issues with driveways, whenever it rains, driveways, roofs, walkways. And we have, and I think the township would recognize, we've got some stormwater issues in this town. we've had, living on Row Road, I've gotten a lot of water from Denise into a drainage creek. And also this first house that's been built, I've had water coming down. Luckily the curb has stopped it in front of my driveway, but there's a lot of water that comes down that hill, Vincenzo Stub I'm talking about. And I understand that one of the houses that's been proposed is going to be basically across from the house that's been built on the Vincenzo Stub. And then there'll be a couple more built over at St. Gerard, right behind the Sweeney house. So we're concerned about ground and stormwater drainage. We also want to know, maybe this is a little early, is there going to be a stormwater prevention protection program for this situation? And again, as I said earlier, we want to know about this. Why we're interested in this also is to build houses, they're going to have to take some trees down and vegetation down, which is going to cause water that the trees would have taken and the vegetation would have taken, and they're not going to, obviously they won't be able to do that. So there's going to have to be some plan to dispose of this water. Prior to Mr. Lisi, there was plans to build, well, when we got involved in it, eight homes. And the solution at that time for the water was to build a retention pond of about 40 feet long by about 20 feet wide by about 15 feet deep. And so we were uncomfortable with that. And of course, they would have put a big fence around it, but still the reality is that's a good sized swimming pool. And we were very worried about it. Fortunately for us, the developer at the time just said, no, I guess I'm not going to do it. Maybe the economy wasn't good. I have no idea, but he stopped. The other two things I just wanted to mention are the following. This first house that was built, we had issues with and several of us had to talk to the foreman about cars parked on Rowell Road. When lawns had to be done, we had to ask the people to move their trucks. I don't think we should have had to ask that. There was a big issue with mud from the construction. It's a normal activity. You're going to get it. And I guess the thing that was noise as well as traffic issues. This was a very busy little place, this Vincenzo Road stub, when they built that first house. And it's going to be no different on the other house, which is going to flank it from what we can see from these plans. Last but not least, I call this a laydown area. I'm not a construction man, but basically what they're going to allot is a half an acre. And I don't think a half acre is going to be adequate to build these houses, because these are big homes. They're substantial homes. They've got to do a better job. We don't want their workmen parking on our streets if we can help it. They ought to make a parking area for them so they are off-site and we don't have to contend with the traffic and noise. So that's my cut at it. There's other people here. I don't want to take all the time.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Norman Schilling. I'm a licensed professional engineer. I have a doctorate in mechanical engineering systems, and particularly fluid mechanics, mass transfer. My wife and I reside at 1400 Rowell Road. We call it the wet area of Rowell Road. We've been Niskayuna residents since 1987, right? Or 1987. And that's been 32 years, and I just want to point out that over those 32 years, we've contributed $290,163.08 in Niskayuna school and town taxes. So I feel I'm entitled to be up here talking about what's happening on Rowell Road. I'm here to express concerns and reservations on the Vincenzo subdivision proposal. As you know, we suffer from a significant flooding problem down on the lower part of Rowell Road. Many people that may be new on the board may not be aware of this. The creek that carries storm water typically after large thunderstorms gets plugged. It gets plugged very fast. And then we wind up with flooding that comes up either on the yard or sometimes up to the house. And during catastrophic events, finds its way into our basements. And in one particular case, wound up with a significant amount of damage to the house. The township's solution for the problem has been, after that catastrophic flooding, was to add a grate, to widen, expand the size of the grate. But that has not been effective as a solution. As a matter of fact, what I brought was a picture for the record. I don't know where I hand this in to, over here. You can look at it. When you're looking at the picture, by the way, you can't see the grate for the stuff, for the detritus, the branches, limbs, leaves, especially when you're in the spring, when you have a lot of leaves after a thunderstorm that find their way down to the grate. I'm going to make this emotional. It really has. The flooding problem has really affected our quality of life. Whenever we go on a trip, the first thing we do on the morning when we're traveling away is to look at the weather report for Niskayuna. Well, our interest is there going to be a thunderstorm? Is there going to be bad weather? Are we going to be prepared then as an option to be able to return if there is flooding, to be able to deal with any damage to the house? We have to keep, again, kind of on our toes wherever we go and whenever we go as to what's going to happen out there. So let me go back to, I think Doug had mentioned about experience with the construction that went forward on the existing home that's on 2520 of Vincenzo. So when you go through the process of putting in a new house, you go through first, you wind up with tree removal, you do grubbing, you do removal of any of the ground cover, and you do the grading, all of which winds up, of course, increasing or reducing the capability of that ground to be able to handle water. What we saw during thunderstorms while the construction was underway was a significant amount of silt that was carried over and down the road, not only into driveways and deposited on the road, but also you've got to suspect or you've got to know that that's going to wind up also winding its way into the sewers and into the disposition and the clearances that are in the sewer system. The aprons that were around the site did not prevent significant soil erosion. So the solution for the stormwater from the Vincenzo Drive site was a dry well. I haven't personally looked at that, how that's operating. I'm not convinced that it has been effective. One of the things, of course, it's going to affect how the dry well operates, how effective it's going to be is going to be, for example, the porosity. Porosity may be affected from initial tests until after, it may change after you have significant and very heavy machinery that is moving over the site. So if a dry well is going to be chosen, and I don't think there's a lot of options or many options that are going to be available to be able to treat that stormwater, what I would like to have the township verify is, has the capacity for the existing dry well been sufficient? What's the capture ratio? How much of the water or the stormwater is actually captured and goes into the dry well? And that's going to affect, of course, the velocity and the quantity of water that streams across the street down Vincenzo into my neighbor's driveways and then into the sewers that eventually finds its way into a plugged grate at the end of the road. How do the predicted percolation rates compare with actual performance? And lastly, how long is required to recover capacity between storms? You know, we talk a lot about global warming, climate change. And of course, one of the effects I think we're seeing is longer and more severe thunderstorms where you can get 2 inches of rain falling within an hour. And that winds up, of course, being a significant amount of water to treat and to be able to handle. So will the existing dry well be used for the property, or will a new dry well be used? How will runoff to neighboring properties be handled? When you go directly down off Vincenzo, when you look at the grading for that property that's going to be parallel or directly opposite 2520, the existing residence, you're going to see that groundwater or the grade is going to wind up going down into neighboring properties. My question is, how is that going to be handled? And I guess basically what I'm asking is a dry well appropriate for continued use as a mitigation measure for stormwater. And finally, as an important contribution to quality of life in the Niskayuna, I just want to say that the wooded area that we're talking about has been really a refuge, an environmental refuge. It wasn't too long ago that we would see turkeys. I don't know what you call them, a gaggle of turkeys, a fleet of turkeys, led by a big tom, would walk across from out of the woods and into our property. We used to see also deers, foxes, used to hear the wail of owls, and we don't see them anymore. It's too bad. I guess it would be different if creatures were taxpayers. That might help a lot. So what I'm asking is that the township do all in its power to be able to protect its faithful and long-supporting residents in this neighborhood. And I rest my privilege of the floor. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Kun Tang. I live in 2513 Antonia Drive, right behind the property that both Doug and no, had just talked about. Just for full disclosure, I do work for the New York State DEC in the Division of Water, so I do have some familiarity with the stormwater regulation. So some of the question I actually just wanted to better understand the environmental review of this planning board would conduct, because I noticed that Mr. Lisi did file a, I think the state environmental review, the state environmental quality review form, the seeker form. And by looking at the form, it seems like he's basically declaring that there is no environmental impact whatsoever by his development. So I know that we're not going to get into an exchange, but can maybe one of you can explain like how you.
As you know, tonight they're in for sketch plan. So the process is just starting tonight. So this is a
Right.
great time to hear from the public. And we'll again, later on, we'll hear from the applicant during the discussion portion. It's the
Okay.
first time many people on this board actually will be involved in a discussion, or we just had the opportunity to look at the package over the weekend.
Okay.
So really, this is the beginning of the process. So the applicant's here, they're listening to what you have to say.
Okay.
And we'll follow the process for any minor subdivision as we do with everybody else, and make sure all those things get addressed and they're appropriate, any submittals are correct.
Okay.
So, sorry, to clarify, the EAF goes to the Conservation Advisory Council. That's a
Uh-huh.
different meeting. They review it over the course of the planning board reviewing it, and then the Conservation Advisory Council does a recommendation to the planning board.
Okay.
On minor subdivisions, is a short form environmental assessment form, and we're the lead agency. But because it's sketch plan and we haven't even classified the subdivision yet, we haven't
Okay.
sent out any coordination letters yet.
Okay. So the town, I guess this board working with the
Conservation Advisory Council. Mhm.
Advisory Council is going to review the form and is going to make a determination whether there is a positive or negative impact.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that would happen after we classified the sketch plan.
Okay.
Is we would then send out the seeker coordination letters, and I know one does go to DEC, but I believe it goes to the Region 4 office.
So I did look at the plan or the form itself. There's a question there that asks about how many acres that this proposal is going to disturb. And I noticed that the consultant for Mr. Lisi, I think his name is Brad Steinberg, put down 0.5 acre. Now, I think that's why I was talking to Doug, and Doug was asking, how big are all these houses? What's the length of the driveway, the size or the width of the driveway? Is this going to be yards, like front yards and or front lawns and backyard? And I recorded that first house that Mr. Lisi put onto the property is probably disturbing definitely more than a half acre already, maybe even close to an acre. So I couldn't believe that if they're going to put 3 more new houses into this area, that the land of disturbance is only 0.5 acre. And, you know, as I said, that I do work for DC, so I do know somewhat about the regulation. And there's going to be additional requirement if it's disturbed more than 1 acre. So I just urge you to look closer and get us maybe better information so we can make a better determination whether is this, it's going to disturb a half acre or is it 2 acre? And then one other thing I noticed that he put down on the form on the very last page, page 3, and it talks about or asks about are there any stormwater that is going to be discharging or coming out of the development? And he checked no to all. That doesn't make sense to me either. It's got to be some stormwater from all this impervious cover, the driveway, the roof leader. It got to go somewhere. So that go to the point of norm. Where does all this stormwater is going to be going and how is it being managed? And then one last thing I wanted to ask or hope that you would look into is it almost seems to me that he's segmenting this whole development. So he put one house in, I think it's last year into this year, and now it's coming with a new proposal to put 3 more. And then it seems like there's something waiting on the wing, and I don't know what's going to happen 2 years from now or 10 years from now. And do you guys take into account the so-called cumulative impact of all this development? And if you do, how is that taken into account into this form that he's filing, that basically claiming that there will be no impact whatsoever? So I just want to bring all this up. And so I'm trying to learn too, because I don't know exactly how the town look at all this information that has been presented. And this is Mr. Lee's property and he has the right to develop it, and I get it. Just want to make sure that he's doing it in according to applicable laws and regulation, and also the town code.
Yes, no, thank you.
Sure.
Good evening. My name is Tim Sarantonio. I live at 2509 Antonia Drive. That's my neighbor over there. I have personally begun to really appreciate the complexities of not only the planning board, but town government as a whole in the past few months. First, through my experience in just paying attention to other developments that have been proposed, and also through my recent appointment as chair of the town's newly created historical committee. Throughout this time, the one thing that I've learned is that integrity matters. And I think that integrity is of the utmost importance when it comes to the proposed 2520 Vincenzo Drive sketch plan. There's 2 elements of integrity that I would like to highlight tonight. First is the integrity of the development itself. There are large amounts of questions, many folks have already addressed these, relating to the environmental and water drain impact that this subdivision may have on the surrounding area. Some items that I hope that are taken into consideration, even at this early stage of the process, and addressed to our collective satisfaction are, and we've heard these, but how big are the homes, the driveways? Will they be as large as the house that's been built already? What is the possibility of flag lots in terms of creating those types of elements alongside that? The status of the stormwater protection plan for the surrounding properties. I'm personally very concerned about what's going to happen to the other elements of the acres. Is that going to be cut down? Not really kind of clear. Last time that work was done, it is behind my property. Way more than what was promised was actually cut down. Like, that's a fact. And then what are the assurances and guarantees made around the construction being proposed itself? Is it going to happen all at once? Is it going to be the same level of impact that the one house had? It was very loud. There was a lot of trucks. They were speeding down the roads. That's normally very quiet and safe where my children, who are 4 and then twin 2-year-olds, play. So obviously peace and quiet are a big, important thing to me. Second is the integrity of the developer themselves. In a February 27th, 2018 Daily Gazette article about this property in question, the following section is quoted from Lou Lisi himself. Quote, "This has nothing to do with the Lisi Group. There is no business involved here," and also was referenced in that same article stating that he purchased the land specifically to build his home and has no plans to bring a larger development to the parcel. Public record. There's a well-established history from this developer on proposing plans that ultimately well exceed what we've been told would happen, or that are used to skirt around major subdivision laws and regulations. What are the ironclad assurances that we have in writing and that can be used for actual accountability relating to the proposed development? And again, I'm still learning. but even reading the sketch plan itself, it only currently makes reference that the 10-year period only guarantees that further review will then be a major subdivision. So it's not even, at least how I'm reading it, not actually put a moratorium on further development. Again, I'm still learning, but that's how it reads. The reality is that this land is theirs to develop if things comply within the law. Yet it is tiresome to constantly feel like we're interacting with Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life. I would much rather know exactly what's being done and in a way that is honest and not trying to use legal loopholes and the hope that citizens of the neighborhood aren't paying attention as the basis for whatever profit will be gained from the land. It is my hope that the planning board take extra care with this particular project and ensure that everything is on the up and up, as well as ensuring as little long-term disturbance as possible. Many thanks to your tireless work on this and other projects. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Evening. My name is Steve McMinn. I live at 1404 Row Road. I'm Norm's neighbor. I'm the in one instance that he mentioned in his little presentation. In 2008, we've always had some water in the backyard. In 2008, there was a major flooding event. The water in the backyard, my backyard, was 3 feet deep. It pushed the wall of my house off the foundation and blew into my finished basement, completely wrecked it, destroyed the water heater, destroyed the heating system, ruined the electricity. My house was condemned because I had no functional power. It took me about a week to get the power restored and uncondemned. It cost me a small fortune to replace the major components that had been damaged. And a lot of the stuff that had been in the beautiful finished basement was just gone forever. That basement now is a buried basement because I could not have a walkout basement I had big picture windows. It was beautiful. That basement's now a buried basement because I had no choice because the water's still coming up into the yard. I will point out that I sued the town after that event and the town settled. And if I get flooded again, that's going to happen again. I want to avoid this problem. We cannot take any more drainage into the bottom of Row Road. I have, when the inlet to that culvert backs up, I think it's a 42-inch culvert. The root of the problem is that culvert is too small. And when that culvert backs up, I have walked across Antonia and down to the other side of the culvert and seen a 42-inch diameter tube of water coming out of the culvert. No more water can come into the bottom of Row Road. So I only learned about this late. We were gone over the weekend. Norm thankfully left a message on my machine, but I'll keep a close eye on it. I actually hired an engineer to do a hydraulic analysis of that whole area. In fact, my son teaches civil engineering at Oxford, and he used the bottom of Row Road as a problem for his civil engineering students. So there's been a lot of analysis done. But whatever happens, we need to make absolutely sure that no more water ends up in that drainage catchment at the bottom of Row Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Privilege of the floor.
I'm Dr. Fantazzi. I live on 1397 Row Road. I am not an engineer, but I moved in there in 1985. We were the second house to move in next to where Mr. Harson lives now on the corner. And we quickly saw that we were going to have a water problem. And we did. Fortunately, I live on a knoll. Most of the water runs over the back of the house, down over this hill, if you get down and see it in the street. It runs onto the street, and it runs between our two houses, between Harson's and mine. And in the spring, it actually bubbles like a stream. You could see where the water goes. And Mr. Harson, who's not here, told me, I know he had a lot of trouble, and he spent $40,000 on his house to deal with this water problem. And there was a house that sold for about $180,000 in 1984. It was the first house in that development. We were number 2, and Harson bought it from the guy that owned it. He was a GE guy, left after a year. And he struggled with this water all the time. I've been struggling with this water. Fortunately, most of it goes around. And when we moved there, obviously there was a lot of deer, as they talk. Water came out of there, ran right down the deer run. It was amazing. Across the street, into the stream, and the deer used to follow the path down, cross the road, go over to the thing in the morning, have a drink, and come out. There was nobody here at the time that's here talking to you. They didn't live there. And then we had a whole, when they cut some trees down in this development process, and that Paulcinelli Road that's there now was supposed to be elevated. That was the big deal then. This was going to come up. I don't know why they said that, but the builder obviously is dead now. And they never did that. But after they cut all the trees down, then after I lived there 2 or 3 days, that whole hill fell into the street. So I had to call the landscaping guys. They came, they dug up this stuff up, brought it up. We got a lot of stones in there. We got some shrubs in there, and it holds it. But the water that comes out of there is amazing. I'm high, I'm above it. It goes up and around, and it goes onto the street, and it goes across the street to these people and all the rest of them into that creek. And it's amazing to see it. And it just, you gotta, if you come up in the spring sometime, I'll take you out in the backyard and you can see it. The other thing that people here haven't talked about, the soil is clay. And the water doesn't go down in it, it goes over it. And I used to walk around back there. They had deer runs, and some of the people used to cross-country ski over there. And of course, that's all gone. But when you walk through there anytime, it's wet. And when those guys put the road in on Paulcinelli, when there was anticipated construction, they were going to put, I think, maybe 12 houses or 14 houses, then it became 10 houses, then 8 houses, then no houses because of the water problem. And so that was abandoned. You go out there in July and you put your hand on that gravel. A lot of it's now covered with grass and shrubs and stuff like that, just overgrowth. It's wet all year round. And that stuff just pours down there, pours onto the street, runs down the street, runs across onto all these lawns, and it's you can't tolerate any more of it. And if you don't do something about it, we shouldn't have to tolerate the expense of taking this on ourselves to fix the problems after they develop, which is what happened here. Nobody anticipated, and then when they built the houses, the problems became evident, and the homeowners had to take these things on, and they paid for them out of their pockets to deal with this. They had no choice. So we can't take any more of it. We shouldn't have to take any more of it. We shouldn't incur any expenses as a result of this development. And our property values shouldn't be depressed because of this. We shouldn't be victims of this. Obviously, he owns the land. You people have the right to tell him what he can and cannot do with it. But I think you owe us, the people who've lived there a long time, and the people you've listened to, protection from the water. And that's all I can say about it. And if you come over someday and you want to stand back there with me in the spring and watch it just go right down between the house onto the road, down across over there between these two houses, come over and take a look. But you can't tolerate any more water. The development back there was given up by the people who owned the land. And they've gone, and at least he bought it. I don't know how he got it. So there was a lot of attempts to build a lot of houses there at one time by other people, and they threw in the towel. He's got it, and I'm not sure that he's well-intended, quite frankly, but we'll see. Thank you.
Thank you. Privilege of the floor. Anybody? Any matters?
Hello.
Hi.
Gail King is here again. I have lived on Balltown Road since 1967. I work at Gail King Electrolysis on Knott Street. I remove here permanently. You're expecting me to speak about the county Knott Street project being planned for 600 feet by 85 feet for $1.5 million to be spent in front of the co-op area of 130 jobs and 10 businesses. Okay, so I said that. So now I would like to talk about your revisions to zoning code. I've picked out a couple of them. I've picked out a couple of them to talk to you about. And I do thank you for the privilege and this precious time to speak to you. My continued prayer for you is that you remember equality for all. The small shops deserve your attention and a place in our community. Number 9 of the list of 60, how many things that you're going to be talking about, 16 items that you want to change codes for. I picked out number 8. It says that creating a section in our zoning code pertaining to zoning immunity, not only for the town itself, but also for other municipalities, such as county, engaging in work within the town. Now, what are you doing here? Making unbreakable rules for the people that live and want to work here? Making separate exception rules for the government employees, the town, the county, and other towns? Will this change in our zoning code then give our government employees the right to take our property, destroy our livelihood, limiting services to the people who live here? And you call this improvements and equality? For what? More heavy-duty roads built so that more heavy-duty the human waste trucks, can be transported through our streets, past our houses and businesses and schools, to the recycling station on Whitmire Drive. This and a nuclear waste on the same road. Now, number 13. Add setbacks for the neighborhood mixed use in the CN district. Well, this could knock out shopping on our co-op street. County owns the right of way up to our front doors. Now, if the shops could have some of that right of way and call it a setback, that could work. We know that's not going to happen. We need more CN districts. They reduce traffic and time getting to the mega shopping plazas. So of the 16 shop items that are listed on your list of things to do on the website, including one about chickens. Yes, when this was farmland, No one had to ask if they could keep chickens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Lorene Zabin, 2455 Brookshire Drive. I wasn't interested in coming tonight because the discussion on the zoning hopefully will be more in depth. And will there be, or should there be a public hearing on that? I think we'll get a lot of comments. I'm basically here because of Mr. Lisi. He certainly is an old friend of the planning board. It seems to me when he bought this wonderful property over there, primarily for his own residence, which is ridiculous. He has a beautiful home off Rosendale Road. And hopefully, I see our historian is here. I had hoped that that property might be on the historic preservation. It's a beautiful old home and it had a wonderful property. Now, when he first bought that property, I thought he had submitted an application for additional homes. I think he, at the time, and I was wondering if this was a re-application of his original plan for a subdivision over there. I know there was quite a bit of acreage. And it required taking down some of the historic buildings like the carriage house and that whole beautiful arrangement. So that I was not able to get a conclusive answer. Is this, may I just ask?
I just want to state that tonight, the agenda item is 2520 Vincenzo Drive, not, I think you're referring to Van Antwerp Drive.
So it's not part of
No,
that
no,
property?
That's a separate project, and I expect that project will probably come back to us after the first of the year.
Okay, so you basically don't have anything other than a written request for,
For tonight's
you
agenda.
have no maps, there's no indication from the builder
For Vincenzo,
for Vincenzo.
we have a sketch plan that's submitted that we'll be talking about tonight. We're just beginning the process of that proposed
Okay.
subdivision.
All right, so actually, we're a little bit early.
Yep, we're right on time.
You're going to discuss that later,
Yep.
I see. The other thing, I can't recall the zoning applications for new submissions. Is this all, I have a feeling there's an underground working here against the co-op. And a lot of what now the zoning is implying is that would certainly enhance the county's revision of what I call a landmark area. I don't know of anyone that's in favor of it, of people who live there, and it seems to be a county aggression more than anything else. And now I find that there's more information about the size of the vehicles taking waste into our plant, which I read in a letter today that still hasn't gotten final approval from the state. And as we know, this has been a tremendous cost override and disturbance to people that live on Whitmire. I was also disturbed to find out that the town, not that the planning board had anything to do with it, but they turned down the town budget, which might have been a little bit of relief for Whitmire Drive. I'll address that at the town board meeting. But getting back to the zoning, I would hope that there would be some extensive information as to the requests and what is the involvement of the people that live here, where we can discuss and whether we like it or we don't like it. Is there a government rule about approving zoning requests rather than having them permanently put on our zoning code?
No, we'll follow the process, and I believe once we get along, what we decide, tonight we're just going to have discussion on all the proposals that are out there, maybe focus on some, because there's quite a bit of work there. We will probably have public hearings. In fact, we will have public hearings to make any changes.
Yeah, required by law. Public
Yep,
hearings at
so-
both the planning board and the town board.
Yep.
Thank you.
Right?
As I say, you know, I commend the Planning and Zoning Board. They are the root of our town. If they don't take into consideration what the town is, was, and is going to be, then we're, as residents, and obvious from the people on Vincenzo and myself, we're long-term residents. Long-term. That's over 10, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever. And they have a heart in this town. And they have spoken up, and I think they have been squashed with an awful lot of what has been approved. And the gentleman was talking about all the number of new additions. You know, the first development, I think, was Avon Crust. And that was back in, it doesn't seem that long ago, but it was in 1957 or 58. And that was sort of the start. And they were done beautifully with a lot of care. Now we're throwing up apartments. We have one coming that apparently decided they needed to put another entrance or exit over there on Village Meadows without even bothering to come to the planning board. Now, rumor has it that you don't think there's anything wrong with that it's a small item, and we can just let them go ahead and do this. I think you're setting a precedent if you don't make them go through a process and showing you what is necessary to have this permission to allow another ingress or egress, whatever it is. It has nothing to do with the Amador building over there that's going to bring more hazard to Balltown Road. There's one way to get in and one way to get out. And I think the people that are on Balltown Road, I think the state certainly should have entered into this and said you've got to find another way for an exit or widen the road, which you know they're not going to do. There's a lot in front of the planning board. I hope you're not careless and thinking is just forget it, we'll do it. We've got a little land left. Let's use it up. Then maybe we don't have to work anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else for privilege of the floor? Last call. Anybody? Privilege of the floor? Okay, seeing no one else, I'm going to close privilege of the floor. Thank you for your comments. We have no unfinished business, and we also have no new business tonight, so we'll move right to discussion items. Item number 8, which is first up, is Village Meadows Site Plan Review, 1200 Hillside Avenue. And we have the applicant, and so I'll kick it off by saying that now this is the process. They made some changes down there. They were under the assumption that didn't require to come to the planning board. That was captured, and they're here tonight in front of the planning board to make sure that the planning board is okay with the changes that occurred there, and that's what we're going to talk about. I did have an opportunity, along with Ms. Gold and the town planner and assistant planner, to walk the site, and I think it was last week. So we got some hands-on experience there. And why don't you tell us about a little bit of the history so that we all up to speed, because everybody on the planning board wasn't able to make it, and they just received the packet this weekend. How's that?
Okay, that sounds great to me. My name is John DeVita. I'm on the HOA for the property we're speaking about. I also live there. This is Michael Bushy. He represents the management company, CYC Realty, that manages it. Essentially, to make clear what's going on here, and I guess this map is coming across, we're not putting in a new entrance. We're taking one out. In fact, we actually did take it out. We had a permit from the engineering department. We thought that was needed. The map you have shows the entrance that's being taken out. It's the orange area there. It's a little bit inaccurate, so I want to correct the inaccuracies. First of all, it doesn't start where the orange line starts. It actually, the road continues up to where I put that blue line in. So that part is still road. And also the way the orange makes it look here, it makes it look like this entrance is 2 or 3 times larger than the other ones. it actually was essentially the same size. It was about 1 foot wider than the middle entrance. So it's not nearly as large as it shows on this map. Essentially, what happened is this. Our roads that were put in when the development started were in terrible shape. They needed to be redone. So we needed to have the roads ripped up and replaced. Okay, we took a look at the usage on the roads. That particular road was hardly ever used. The reason it was hardly ever used is because of where the carports and garages are. People came in the two entrances that basically led into the carports and garages and pretty much ignored that road. In fact, we found that one of the uses that for that road was when we didn't want people from outside of our community were coming in to use the dumpsters in our community to dump larger items of garbage, which should have been dumped legally rather than come into us. So that was the one thing. We were repairing all these roads. It's being done over a 2-year project. It started this past summer. It'll be finished next summer. The estimate for doing that road as well as all the other ones was it was going to cost us about $50,000 more. As it was, we had to assess our residents $750 plus a $35 increase in the monthly HOA fee to raise the money to do the roads that we did do. I couldn't see raising that even more for a road that was almost never used and really is of little consequence in terms of the way we're living in our community. We went before the advisory committee last week. They made a number of, I think, very reasonable recommendations. We are completely in favor of the recommendations that they made, which I said at the time at the meeting of that board. And we'd just like to do this properly and get it done right. And that's why we're here. And
Okay.
I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Okay, thank you. And the conservation, in the agenda statement, basically the Conservation Advisory Council, the recommendations were, have a maintenance contract for all the fire hydrants with the town, which we've already talked about, and the applicant is willing to do that. Village Meadows Monument sign, so the existing sign at the entrance egress that has been closed would be relocated to one of the other locations. And there's some current lighting poles that are there, and want to make sure that those were still maintained and functional and, didn't look like they were abandoned type of thing. And then the last was CAC recommends the implementation of directional signs. When you pull in from one of those other two entrances, it's not clear where the 100 or 900 building is. And I believe that this Conservation Advisory Council, and I believe that it'd be great for your own safety that if police or fire come in, they know quickly
We
which
completely
building.
agree.
So those are all, I think, great recommendations, and it sounds like you're pretty good with those. All right. So really, I'd like to guess, the board, this is the first opportunity anybody else has. Leslie and I did walk the site along with Laura and Mr. Henry. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions or comments regarding.
Yeah, so that we make sure that this is not an empty exercise. This is a common ownership community. This is a condominium. Is that correct?
Right, yes.
So you've changed the underlying structure of the condominium. Have you received Attorney General approval for a new condominium declaration because you have changed the underlying asset?
I'm not sure what you're asking about. What we did have is at our last annual meeting, we had a unanimous vote to take that road out.
So I don't want to engage in legal opinions here, but you've got an approval for a condominium and a condominium declaration that approves the layout, presumably that we've seen here. So what you should really communicate to council to make sure that you have made a change to this condominium declaration in accordance with a plan submitted to the Attorney General. And furthermore, I don't know if your financing, the underlying financing would approve this. Again, these are not matters relevant to us, but I want to make sure we don't approve something that's dead on arrival.
There's no financing. We basically raised the money ourselves.
there's underlying financing, is there mortgage debt on the project? So individual, so there's individual cooperators or condominium owners, and you have a share in the grounds, is that right?
Yes.
So
We own the inside of our property. For
Yep.
instance, I
Yep.
own 402 inside.
Yep.
The outside is held in common. Okay, that is the board that's elected, our HOA board basically is in charge of taking care of that property with the aid and through our management company.
I understand
Okay.
that.
And we, in doing this project, had a vote of the community at our annual meeting that voted unanimously to take out that section of road.
My suggestion to the board and maybe to Alexis to maybe ask, maybe this could be considered at a later date. What I don't want to do is pursue an approval only to have underlying legal issues thwart the approval, right? I don't want.
There are no other underlying issues.
I think he's referring to the legal requirements when certain actions are taken by homeowners association. The first point was that you have to, in some instances, file with the AG if you're making changes to the underlying asset. With respect to the financing, I think the concern was that if you have an outstanding mortgage, that the collateral, it has been revalued based on the removal of the driveway.
There is no outstanding mortgage for the community as a whole. Individual owners may have mortgages for, again, the insides of their individual, and nothing has been done to affect that value at all.
So it's
That's an assertion you've made. What I'm asking is for confirmation of
Yeah.
that fact.
Okay.
Certainly the first point on the condominium declaration, we would need something, a confirmation that the Attorney General you don't need to amend or revise the condominium declaration.
You're talking about the association documents itself, right? Making sure that, because that's approved by the Attorney General.
Right.
So I want to make sure.
Presumably
You're
includes.
making a change in that, they want to make
Yeah.
sure that change is
Right.
one
Yeah.
of them. I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if that's a phone call to the state or whether you work
I'm not here
with
to
your
thwart it.
attorney.
I just want to make sure we're
Yeah.
not giving you approval only for you to come back
Yeah.
saying, oh, we
Yeah.
need, we may have a separate process.
I think that's a great
well-
question.
We can do our
Michael,
due
you can take
diligence
care of
and look
that?
into that. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
All right,
something for the
fine.
property manager to pursue.
Yep, I know exactly.
Again, I am not trying to be an obstacle. I just want to make sure this is separately
And that's
tracked.
something, again, tonight, this is the first time we've seen it. If we decide that we're satisfied enough to call for a resolution next meeting, you got between now and our next meeting, which is January 13th, to make contact and come through that question.
All right. So
All right.
take care of that. Okay.
January 13th, all right? Okay. I think that's a good question. All right. As far as any other questions on the site plan or the changes from the board at all? Leslie? Yeah, would you grab the wireless mic? Is that on? It doesn't-
Yeah, keep it really close. It won't pick it up unless it's really close. Like even closer.
Get it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Historically, I was the project leader when the development was originally approved. And there was lengthy discussion with the city engineer because the ingress egress that was removed lines up with the city road. And there was talk of making it a proper through access because that would aid in case of mutual aid, like fire districts and whatnot. The city did not want to go, at least the city engineer responsible for it did not want to go through. So there are 3 little barriers which would never stop a fire truck from getting through if they needed to. But the roadway was paved in from hillside to some distance from that barrier, but I don't know, you said maybe 15, 20 feet? The intent was to have it abut, and it did not. But still, it did provide emergency
Yeah.
access for.
Maybe I can help you out here. So if you, it's gonna say Oakland, it's Oakland Ave is the street, yeah.
The alternative is for the emergency vehicle coming from the city in mutual aid to go Kilburg and come up to Hillside and then turn in, which would take longer.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a big difference, but it is a difference.
No, it is a difference.
And I'm concerned about
Yeah.
safety, and to some extent, I'm concerned about the town's liability as
Yeah,
well.
I'd like to comment on that because I was at the walkthrough, Leslie, and that was one of the comments I had when we did the walkthrough at first. So if you come down Oakland, coming into this property, there's three, I think there are 4x4 pressure treated ballards in place that isolate the end of the dead end at Oakland from this property. And there's grass and possibly a little bit of a swale there. And right now it's all covered in snow. So if there was an intent by the original planning board or in collaboration with the city to have Oakland be able to have an emergency access there, obviously it's not functioning because of the snow. If there was no snow there, like you said, I'm sure they could knock the 4x4 if they really had to and get through there. But and I was kind of where Leslie was, I thought one possible option would be to take the middle 4x4 out and just put a chain across. That way, if there was a problem, they could unhook the chain and come through, right? But I thought I would explore a little bit. So I took a ride down and around to go down to the access where Oakland would be. And it's quite a torturous path to get down there and to there. And personally, after I took the ride after our meeting, my thought was, geez, it was a good idea. But after I took that ride, it seemed like it would not be the way that a rescue or emergency vehicle would go at all. It's much faster to go down Collenberg and come into one of the other entrances.
I did something similar, and if those out, I came prepared in case it came up. The closest firehouse in Schenectady to us is Fire Station 4, located on Knott Road, and you'll see that coming in. So I basically got some aerial maps and took a look. If you were coming from Fire Station 4,
Down there.
okay, I may have.
It's okay.
one short-
I'll
okay.
share with Mr. McParland here. Got it. Go
If
ahead.
you're coming from Fire Station 4 and trying to come to Hillside Avenue, those of you that have ever driven a large truck knows that the one thing you don't want to do is make 90-degree turns or greater than 90-degree turns when you're coming in them. So there are two routes you could take. One would be to come up to Lenox, follow Lenox all the way down until it comes into Kellberg, come down Kellberg, and then up Hillside. The other one, if you thought Lenox was a little not wide enough, you would come down, which one is it? Yeah, this one here. The dotted line, basically that would come down Van Antwerp. And then you'd come across on Wood and again end up on Kellberg. Both of those would be much faster ways to get to the community than trying to make what amounts to two right turns to basically put you on a narrow road and then have to ride down a barrier to get in. It might have been a nice idea at the time, 27 years ago, maybe it was a nice idea, but in terms of practical uses of the roads right now, I mean, it just would not work. The quickest way is to come as a show in that map. And if you really wanted a wide road, you'd go over to Rosa and come down Rosa.
I just want to point out to the board, there's two lines, a dotted and a solid, and both of those are the simple path. But if you come on the solid line past Steinmetz Park, there's a pond there. You would hang her right there, which would take you to Oakland, and then you go all the way down Oakland to the dead end to tie in on this little cul-de-sac or the end of Oakland. And that's where the three bollards are located. So I agree with you. You would have to come up and around and then come down in a street. There would be no reason to do that.
I mean, if you've ever, anyone who's ever driven a large truck knows you don't want to make 90-degree turns on narrow roads.
And then the
You
other
want to
point,
avoid that as much as possible.
and I think the other point is you have two entrances on Hillside. So if there is a problem with one,
You have the-
very close to each other, you're going to go into the other one. At least that was my personal thoughts. Obviously it's open up to the board, but was my conclusion also after driving the streets there.
Yeah, that was my thought process too. I drove through there today. I mean, I do agree that some better signage, just so you have a better
Yeah.
idea of where the buildings are.
We
But
completely agree.
But as I was driving around, I didn't necessarily see where I would have, where I would be missing the third entrance. Like the two entrances seemed adequate, and then I could get all the way around pretty easily. But I mean, the signage was the only thing.
And also, if you were attempting to get near a fire hydrant, coming in those two entrances would get you to the fire hydrants quicker than trying to come through the other way.
Anybody else have any questions for the applicant or thoughts? You have anything else, Ms. Gold, at all? I know you spent some time with us. We appreciate it down there at the walkthrough. Anyway, that's kind of where I ended up, myself coming after walking the site and then driving it later on to try to see whether there was any benefit to that Oakland Avenue dead end, as far as emergency service. And Laura also, planning department also sends it to police and fire. And I think the only comment from the fire department was to make sure that they have fire hydrants, and they said they have fire hydrants, and then the concern about having them maintained properly, and the applicant is willing to enter an agreement with the town to maintain the fire hydrants to the satisfaction of the fire department, because that's a typical way of doing it. And then they have an interest in doing that because they need to have them maintained anyway. So it seems like a win-win there.
Yeah, that's just because when the fire chief originally looked at the maps, they don't keep the private fire hydrants on their maps, so they were concerned about the distance of laying down like an approved route to the building. But they were okay with private hydrants as long as they're maintained. And you could either have them submit certifications to us every year that they're maintained, which is very difficult, obviously, for staff to keep track of, or our guys could regularly maintain them, and that just ensures that when the fire truck goes in there, that they turn them on and they're going to work.
That would be wonderful, because it also means that the fire department knows exactly where the fire hydrants are.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Fire District 1 would do that.
Mhm.
Well, actually, no, our guys do that. And then,
But they're used to working with Fire District 1.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so yeah, that's pretty much it. So if I had to make a recommendation, I would say that we'd call for a resolution granting an updated site plan approval, I guess, with the conditions that are noted in the agenda statement that's set forth by the Conservation Advisory Council, which the applicant agrees with, what we just talked about, along with the additional comment from by Mr. Scributennis to at least delve into that, to make sure that there is no application changes or declaration changes as a result of the physical changes of the site from the Attorney General's office. If you get that back to us, and if the board's okay, we could have a resolution on the January 13th meeting. Is there any other comments? Is everybody okay with that? Although, how about we just do a show of hands of all those in favor of resolution for the January 13th meeting, granting site plan approval with those items stipulated? Looks like we're all set on that. Any other questions by you or anybody on the board?
And I've already arranged with Ms. Robertson. She's going to send us the form for setting it up for the
Right.
fire department to have the
Right.
hydrants made.
Right, and if it isn't complete, we'll just make sure that it's a condition in the resolution, and you're going to do it anyway, so it'll work out. Okay?
Thank you
Thanks for
very
your
much.
time. Thank you.
All
I
right.
really appreciate
Great.
it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Leslie, too, for your comments. I was with you until I did that drive. Yeah, thank you. All right. So that takes us, Village Meadows is done. So bring up 2520 Vincenzo Drive, a 4-lot subdivision for sketch plan. And we have the, I guess, representatives of the applicant, right? In both cases?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself from this as I am contiguous to this the application.
Yes, yeah.
All bullpen for a lefty.
Yes, yep. And Ms. Gold will take the seat for this session, and anything going forth on Vincenzo, Ms. Gold will also sit in on that. Okay? How you doing?
I'm good, Chairman Walsh. How are you?
Good.
You need to read through.
So I think maybe just give us a quick high-level overview. It's the first time, I know that I met with Mr. Lisi and Mr. Steenberg there a few weeks ago, along with the planning department. So maybe just give us a quick overview. And again, you heard a lot of comments tonight from the public. So hopefully we can at least address on some of those. I know this is sketch plan, so this is the beginning of the process. But we know there's not going to be any approvals tonight because it's the first time the board see it, and we have a lot of questions. So let's start the job, I guess, getting it done. Okay.
So good evening, everyone. Chairman Walsh, members of the planning board. My name is Shane Mahar. I am not only Lou Lisi's son-in-law, but also work for the family company. As Chairman Walsh noted, this is the first meeting for the official 2520 Vincenzo Drive development that we proposed or that we are proposing. Brett Steenberg is our engineer of record and has helped us design this project. To walk through some of the history of the project, I am not a lawyer, I'm not an engineer, but I hope to be one of your neighbors. if through this process, granted the approval, my wife and our two kids will take ownership of Lot 2, as it's been defined on this map. And my in-laws would take Lot 4, and my other sister-in-law and brother-in-law would take Lot 3. My sister-in-law, Allie, and her husband, Spencer, are the owners of Lot 1 in the house that was recently constructed here over the last 18 months or so. So quick high-level 30,000-foot view of all of this. There's a lot of reference to stormwater and tracts of land, and I just want to make clear, from what I understand through Lou's history and knowledge of these parcels, there are two separate tracts of land here. One owned by the Pocinellis, which was the dead end of Pocinelli Road, which abuts Mr. Fantozzi's property. And that there was a proposal to develop that land a number of years ago, and there were a lot of issues with stormwater there that were addressed. And to Mr. Fantozzi's point, the developer at the time did step away from that. The tract of land that Lou has bought for the family is the old Valentine piece. It's 17 acres. There is a map of record that Laura can confirm that was approved, or I don't want to say approved, but there's a map of record on file at the town hall that when all of this land was subdivided many decades ago, there were house lots designated for through streets and interconnecting streets and smaller than what your typical average Niskayuna lot is, like on the surrounding streets, Antonia, et cetera. So we are not proposing a through street. We are not proposing to connect any streets. Lou's intention in buying this property over 2 years ago was to create family estate lots. This is for the family. This is for my mother-in-law and him to build a new home and retain ownership of the largest tract of the land. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law are now residing at 2520 Vincenzo. And then my wife and our family would take Lot 2, and then my other sister-in-law and brother-in-law would take Lot 3. My wife's youngest sibling, my brother-in-law Michael, is currently living and working in New York City. He at this time has no intentions of moving back home. As much as we've tried to convince him and remind him that Niskayuna is a great place to live and raise a family, Mikey's quite content in New York City. And through a meeting with Chairman Walsh and Laura a few weeks ago about the future subdivision, or if there was a future subdivision of this property, Lou agreed to put and I don't want to call it a moratorium because I don't think that's the correct word, but a restriction on the proposed development here that no further subdivision would come for the next 10 years if granted approval. So the intent again is that Lou and my mother-in-law would take the larger lot, the 11 acres, and then we would flank, my sister-in-law Allie and her brother and my brother-in-law Spencer, who are currently residing at 2520 Vincenzo. Houses have not been designed yet. On the map, we're showing a similar footprint to what my sister-in-law and brother-in-law have already built at 2520 Vincenzo. My wife and I are currently looking at floor plans. We have an idea of what we'd like to build for ourselves, based on our family and our design. But they will not be, none of the houses will be larger than what's currently there. So I think the house at 2520 Vincenzo Drive can be used as a fair comparison of what the proposed houses would be when they come back in front of the building department for a building permit if this subdivision is approved. To comment on a few other just side notes of things that were brought up, I'm certainly looking forward to becoming your neighbor, and I will gladly give you my cell phone and business card tonight. Throughout the process of building 2520 Vincenzo, I got to meet George and his wife at 1385 Rao Road. They have my number. We've spoken often. We've got a nice relationship. And it's nice when I, go to visit my sister-in-law, we wave and say hello and have a good rapport. So for anybody in the crowd tonight, I'd be glad to chat with you afterwards. Be glad to give you my cell phone number. Call anytime. And then the other point to make, this is a family plot. This is not a for-profit development. Many of you know Lou. He has developed much of the town of Niskayuna as we know it today. I could stand here and list a couple of dozen streets or projects that make up our town and make it for the better. At least that's my personal opinion as his son-in-law and as a resident here. I began working in the town of Niskayuna at a previous employer in 2002. In 2011, when my wife and I got married, we decided to build in Niskayuna, and we currently reside at 1 Seneca Road. Like what Lou does, I grew up in the town of Stillwater, was very involved up there, was the village fire chief for a number of years, and had a house on the Hudson River. Great sweeping views of the mighty Hudson, and had a great 1,000-square-foot ranch house. And when Amanda and I got engaged, we had a discussion about where are we going to live? Are you moving in with me? Are you moving to Stillwater? Are we building? Are we going to go to Saratoga? And Lou said to us, there's an opportunity in Niskayuna. I know of a 2-acre parcel going for sale. I can, subdivide it, get it approved, and you two can buy an acre and build a house. And that's exactly what we did back in 2011. And now this opportunity has come up for us to stay within the town of Niskayuna, relocate, and be that much closer to our loved ones. So that's from a, 30,000-foot view, maybe a little bit too much detail, but a full background on where this development or how this development has evolved. I'll let Brett speak to the engineering, the stormwater, to all of those issues. Lou is physically out of town tonight. Otherwise, he was going to be here. So he can obviously discuss any legal issues with Alexis or Laura or Chairman Walsh. Because again, I am not a lawyer. I am not an engineer. But this one is personal for the family. And obviously I'm involved not only as an employee, but as son-in-law, and hopefully, like I said, the future owner of Lot 2 there. So I'll turn it over to Brett. Chairman Walsh, before I step away, any questions on anything I just said?
I think the engineering is the heart of this, and making sure
Okay.
that the sketch plan complies with, and we'll talk some more about that after.
And just one quick note, I forgot to mention regarding the vehicles parked on Rowell Road and the side streets in there. The one, although not maybe a welcome experience while we were building 2520 Vincenzo, I can say with confirmation that the infrastructure work that had to be done in Vincenzo Drive has already been done. So the water line was extended, the water main was extended. There was a new hydrant added at the property line. Natural gas was already extended into the property, and electric is already there at the property line. So the amount of work that needs to be done in Vincenzo Drive now is quite minimal because all of those extensions have been brought up into the property. So going forward, at least on the Vincenzo Drive entrance, the core amount of work there will be just the physical construction of the house, not actually digging in the street or causing any further disruption to the pavement or Vincenzo Drive infrastructure there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brett Steenberg. I'm the engineer. Lou has contracted with me to take this subdivision, through the approval and planning process and subdivision approval process here at the town. As we met, and actually what I want to open up by saying I appreciate getting all of the public comment, especially up front as part of the project, because it saves a lot of changing things and revising things and where we stand as we move forward down the road. And what I'm hearing, and I kind of knew it coming into it based on what I knew about the area, knowing people in the area, as well as town employees. There is a historical drainage problem in that area. We knew that. One of the things we will be looking at very closely is the drainage for each one of these house lots and how we can manage it on site, and with any luck, actually decrease the amount of runoff off the site by creation of, I know the previous engineer used a dry well, and I know there was some comments and questions about dry wells. Half of old Niskayuna is drained in dry wells. Many of the streets in old Niskayuna are all dry wells. And not a great solution for town streets. I'm going to be very honest about that. But that's how it was constructed back then. And it works. It's not ideal. It's not what you see in the new subdivisions, but dry wells do work. They are a long, they've been utilizing them for drainage and infiltration for many, many, many years.
Can I ask one question on that?
Yes.
Just because I don't know. The dry well that was referenced, is that a dry well from like a storm sewer for Vincenzo, or is that a dry well to pick up rainwater from the roof and impervious surfaces for the house that was built?
I actually don't know the answer to that because I haven't really researched what
I know
Luigi and
the answer
ABD.
to that. It's there's a dry well that goes along the south side of the entirety of the driveway for the existing home. And that's to pick up all the runoff from the impervious surface that was added with the roof and the driveway, rather than, they looked at, like, I'm gonna say at least 4 different ways to treat the water when they were trying to do that single family home building permit. And they ended up at, the soils are completely impermeable. So you can't expect anything there. So they ended up digging a trench and doing a dry well. Like I think it's 2 feet wide, and it just essentially extends down the entirety of the driveway.
That would be more, but actually I hadn't researched for that. It'd be more what would be considered a dry swale or infiltration swale. But there are a lot of methods, and I just got done going through this process at the Glen at Highland Meadows and Queensberry. And Queensberry has a very unique stormwater management requirement. No other town that I know of has this stormwater management requirement, and then get away with it because 90% of Queensberry is on beautiful sand, except for my site. They do not even allow you to discharge volumes. The way the DEC and most stormwater management plans are, you can, as long as you're attenuating your peak flow rate. So if 3 cubic feet per second is running off your site in the pre-development before you do anything on the site, you can't discharge more than 3 cubic feet per second. And what that does is it makes it so that the stream channels and downstream analysis aren't being inundated with more water. So you attenuate it on site. And that's how 98% of the stormwater management is done in the town of Niskayuna. Town of Queensberry actually requires you to attenuate your volume to less than what is the requirement. So if there's 30,000 gallons of water leaving the site prior to development, you have to reduce that. You can't discharge more than 30,000 gallons, which is an extremely difficult task when you start looking at creating impervious surfaces and taking away vegetative surfaces. We found ways, and we were on solid clay with groundwater at 2.5 feet in depth. We found ways through bioretention basins and rain gardens and other methods to attenuate not only the peak runoff rates, but the volume rates as well. And that was all working through a process with Clough Harbor Engineering, who was the review engineer. And we came up with a good design. This is nothing new for what we've done. And we can certainly, with these 3 additional building lots on here, find ways so that we're not going to inundate the existing issues with stormwater management. The reason this parcel is not being developed into 18,000 square foot lots is because of that stormwater management issue. I know people have looked at it. I know it's been looked at over time to connect these streets. I mean, you can see, looking at the configuration of the parcel, the configuration of the substreets, it was always intended that this parcel was going to be developed as an addition to the neighborhood. Anybody who would drive through that neighborhood, I would understand it when I see those stub streets ending that, hey, that road's probably going to go somewhere someday. I would, and you can see they're lined to create parallel running streets, create block style patterns, interconnectivity of roadways. That's not going to happen with this parcel. And the main reason this is not going to happen with this parcel is because of the issues, and other developers have looked at it. It's been vacant for years, and it's because of the stormwater runoff. When Lou looked at this parcel, he understood he's not going to be able to do that. That's why he decided to purchase this parcel for his family estate, mitigating for 20 lots stormwater and mitigating for 4 building lots stormwater, and being able to mitigate it on site and not exceed and exasperate the existing drainage problems is a very different task. It can be done for 4 lots. It would be very difficult to do for 20. We will be looking through this process. We will be addressing it. We will be meeting the chapter 189-20 of the subdivision codes for stormwater management as it's stated with review of downstream analysis. Basically, we'll be looking at whatever, if we can mitigate it on site, that's our downstream analysis. It's on site.
Yep, and part of the process is obviously for us to give you a sketch plan approval before you start investing in all the engineering. And for the town to do either a peer review internally or externally, which I'm not sure where we'll go with this, to make sure that, any of the analysis or engineering that you do is, appropriate and, gets a check, basically.
Exactly. And that's why we're here this evening, is to get your view. The lots, minimum size, 2 acres, that's almost 5 times the allowable lot size in that zone. The remaining lands, 11.3 acres plus or minus, that Lou plans on building his house. The note, as we previously discussed, Lou doesn't want to. I know there was discussion over restricting the lands in perpetuity. If he is deceased in 20 years, he doesn't want his siblings or whoever inherits the property to spend thousands of dollars in court fees trying to overturn if they did want to develop that property. It's 11 acres in a great town with a great school district. And if they wanted to develop it 11, 20, 30 years down the road, it's something they should be able to do. It's an investment for him. It's an investment for his family. That's why we added the note that, if within the next 10 years, we look at this as a whole. We look at, okay, he did 4 lots. This now is a cumulative impact of the 4 lots plus whatever he plans on doing as a major site plan review or major subdivision review, not subdividing individual lots off as was suggested at one point that would happen. He's looking at doing this as a 4 lot subdivision and, for the family as you see. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Now, obviously, there's lots of things that I got some notes here that were brought up by the public tonight. One of them that was actually I flagged also reviewing the short form was there's a comment from the public regarding the
Limits of disturbance.
Yeah, it's 3B, total acreage to be physically disturbed, half an acre you have. I assume that includes, the long drives and so,
That includes the long drives and the building footprints. I don't know how much area, and that number will probably be refined as we go through grading plans and stormwater management plans. The stormwater management may actually increase that substantially depending on what we have to do to clear areas to create stormwater management. But that will be, I anticipate it to be between a half acre and 1 acre of total disturbance for the 3 additional buildings.
Yeah, I think you could do some, better just swag at that now, because that, like, as stated by the public, you got, 4,000 square foot homes, probably 2-story, you got some driveways here so you should take a look at that and see.
Yeah.
See where you're really at, whether it's close to an acre already or, where you stand there. I think that's a good comment. Obviously things like the trees, I know that, we have a tree committee, and as we go further along the process, we'll have the tree committee walk the site, take a look and mark things that are appropriate for preservation, and obviously try to minimize any removal of any vegetation that we can. Obviously lots of concerns about flooding, and that's one of the things we'll have to continue to talk about, kind of whether, we have to do a downstream analysis or whether just analyzing for the 4-lot subdivision and maintaining the water on site is sufficient or not. I'm not sure what the guiding, I guess we'd call it code or legislation is on that, and whether what our power is there, or whether we need to. So that's something we need as a board to discuss how far we go with that, and we may need some help from the engineering department also, because we always look to the engineering department to help us out and give us some guidance to make sure we do the right thing. All right. Let's see what else. But I mean, and I'm not belittling what the public said. I mean, it's basically, we hear a lot about water, right? And we don't want, definitely don't want to make it worse. And you just made the comment that hopefully we can make it better. I know a lot of times with developers, as long as they don't make it worse, that's the goal. But yeah, here's an opportunity to hopefully make it better. And if there's other things that the town can do, Laura, from a whether taking a look at, there's a picture of that grate that was plugged with. That's a maintenance issue, right? So we need to make sure that whoever is responsible for maintaining those is that the water is allowed to flow. I mean, I don't know how it's out there today, but with all that rainfall and things melting, might be. It might be a good situation there. We want to give it the opportunity to flow. Shame on us if it doesn't flow because it's blocked, right? But I mean, that's pretty much it. Now, the biggest thing I had, and again, I'm only one voice here, so I'll let anybody chime in anytime they want, is, was whether or not, hey, these are flag lots, which, our comprehensive plan say that they're not preferred, I guess would be the word. And then the other thing is whether or not there's any area variances required as a result. When the original home was built on lot number 1, which is the current lot, right?
Correct.
It didn't come to the planning board, didn't have to, as a building permit and work through the planning and building department to get their permit. And if you look at the lot number 1, the existing home that's there, it would have plenty of frontage along the end of the dead end Vincenzo. So would it exceed the minimum requirements? There is no issues. Obviously, there wasn't.
No, it didn't exceed the minimum requirements, but it's essentially a pre-existing non-conforming lot. So
Oh, is
it's
that
allowed
what
to
it
have
is?
a building permit, yeah.
So because,
The requirements are 100 feet
okay,
and it has 60.
yeah, okay, the existing, because the way that Vincenzo.
Well, it might actually be 87. Is that 87 or 67
Mhm.
there, Brett?
I think it's 67.
Is it?
The way
Okay.
it runs at an angle there.
So that's agreeing with you. So that's my biggest question. If that's the case, are we now making it less non-conforming lot 1 and creating 3 lots that require area variances?
It is, we've reviewed the code pretty closely. The way lot width is described in the code is it's at the setback line, building setback line, which is 35 feet from the right-of-way line. And historically, and there is precedent to this, if the setback, once you get 35 feet into the property, if your frontage along that line exceeds 100 feet, you are compliant. And actually, Shane can personally speak to that because his lot is actually one of the lots that was permitted at 1 Seneca because of that.
We, just from my own personal experience, we have 90 feet of frontage, but at the setback line, we have 110 feet.
Yeah.
And when we built in 2011, there were no variances or nothing required.
Yeah.
And I don't know of any, without researching it, the only other one that I know of that falls under this would be 225 Agostino, has about 30 foot of frontage on it,
Right.
cul-de-sac.
So all I'm saying is I need help with that.
And
because
I understand that's
to
something
make
that-
sure that, I've talked to Alexis and Ms. Robertson about it. I need some help to make sure, because part of the process, if there are area variances, we need to, make a recommendation to the zoning board of appeals. If we agree that it's the right thing to do, this board would vote on that. Again, then you'd be subject to the decision of the zoning board of appeals, whether the lots can go forward or not. If that's not the case, it's strictly, sketch plan and whether we're happy with it. One thing when I was, so that's important that we come through that, and I'll be looking at, the planning department and the legal department to make sure that they filter that, because we're not going to be obviously granting sketch plan approval tonight. This is the first discussion we've had. And then, so we need to come through that. All right?
Chairman, can you confirm though, we're talking about the existing lot today, doesn't meet the setback or the frontage requirement? The existing lot that's.
The building permit was a pre-existing non-conforming lot. It's
Right.
allowed. It's allowed.
It was allowed for the
if the lot
first
is,
building construction.
yeah, that's allowed.
When lot number 2 is developed, if it were approved, does that diminish the amount of frontage on lot 1?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you even need to think about that. Essentially, you just look at the 3 lots that are created and then look at what the frontage is that they have. I mean, yeah, the one lot that gets left over that has the most frontage is lot 4, because
Frontage to what street?
Van Antwerp, it doesn't actually have to be constructed.
That's where the, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say set aside whether there's a house or not a house. You're just looking at the frontage on the 4 lots that are created. So
Okay.
lot 1 probably has like 40, let's say 67, but no, sorry, 33 3.
On road,
Lot 1
on
and
Rowell
lot
Road.
2 on Vincenzo Drive
On
have like
Vincenzo.
33 feet. And then lot 3 has probably like 30 feet off of St. Gerard. And then lot 4 has 60 feet off of Van Antwerp Road. You can have bigger road frontage somewhere else. It still counts.
Help me understand, like lot 3, you said it has off of St. Gerard, it has frontage. I don't see that if St. Gerard just is a stub and it's not extended, if it's all driveway.
I don't see it either. What
Yeah.
would it be?
If you look at the lot lines, right?
Hmm.
The lands now are formerly of Sweeney. You can see that black line that goes up and hits. And then there's another black line that's.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you have like 30
Yep.
feet there where the driveway.
So basically the width of the driveway that services lot 3 is.
Well,
but
that
maybe a little bit-
section's labeled as being north 72 degrees, 32 minutes, 7 seconds west,
Yeah.
59.184 feet. You can
Yeah.
basically assume you just divide that in half, and that's what the frontage is for lot 3.
For lot 3.
Along the right of way, not at the setback line.
Yeah, I mean, we'll look into it, but I have never seen that interpretation. My initial interpretation is even if you go 30 feet back, that you still don't have.
And I admit I need
frontage.
help.
I mean,
I don't know the answer.
I would say that every cul-de-sac lot in the town of Niskayuna has fallen under that.
yeah, no, that's
interpretation.
absolutely the way it's measured on a cul-de-sac. I mean, that's very clear in our code. But
It's not
these don't qualify, I don't think, as like, that's not what that code is
They're
getting
not
at.
cul-de-sac.
You're certainly, I mean, the legal department, we can research it and you're certainly allowed to appeal our interpretation. But yeah, that's something that we'd have to look into.
And it's just something, when we met, I didn't,
Right.
we just
Understood.
looked at the concept, right? And now we're getting into the details of the concept where that question has come up.
But if a road were constructed through it and you had the frontage on a road, then you wouldn't have the issue
Right.
of the variance.
And that's counterintuitive of what we're trying to do here today.
Well,
Yeah.
why would it be counterintuitive?
Because why would we construct 200-foot of road and create more drainage problems to do something?
To meet the zone and the setbacks and the frontage, that would be the reason. But if it doesn't support it, then it doesn't support it.
And that's a good comment by Mr. Laflamme, because that was one of the things I wanted to ask is if you were, let's pick St. Gerard Drive. If you were to extend that 100 feet into lot number 4, the road, and then you would, lot 3 would be compliant right at the front, and lot 4 would be compliant. And that would be a town road that would get turned over to town, and they would plow it for you, right? It'd be a hammerhead or, and if you compared that to the amount of driveway that you have, it might be pretty darn close to the amount of driveway you have to construct. And again, that's why we're here, right? To talk about these things. I don't know if, have you looked at that at all? or
Yeah, we've
thought about that?
looked at that, and it's something that is a possibility.
Yeah, and if you-
But it is a,
And there's a cost associated
there's
with
a
it.
cost.
It might be
and
more
the
than,
cost may be,
Yeah.
I mean, if it were me, and I'm not speaking for Lou, but if it were me, my cost would be, okay, well, I'm going to put 2 more lots on the other side. And they really don't want to do that because this is their property. And if I'm going to build a road, I
Yeah.
mean, to build roads,
understand. Well, you had indicated that the stumps were there, kind of implying that at some point there'd be a road, right?
Right.
So you did mention that earlier for residents to accept that. I
Yeah.
guess it would be acceptable for a developer to accept that.
And that's something, but we're looking to try to keep this development as low impact as possible.
Yeah, I understand.
And that was the initial intent with this sketch plan.
yeah, the last thing I want to do is promote putting a road through and making this a larger subdivision than it is.
And
know.
our review of the code, and that's something that, like you said, the legal department will have to take a look at. But I do not see anything in the code that would identify these as flag lots. I've gone through the definitions. Lou has gone through the definitions. Lou is much better at reading code and legal language than I am. But I also am versed with many zoning codes and reviewing the definitions, and also took a look around the town for some precedent where this has been done
Yeah.
in the past. And I've found at least 4 with a quick look going through the Sims program. I don't know if any of them received
Yeah.
variances. I know one didn't because I actually was involved with the project. But this is
Yeah.
something that's been
We'll just have to come through that as part of this, right? Because you could do the same for Vincenzo. If you think, hey, if I extend that 100 feet into lot 1 and lot 2, I'd have, could change the arrangement of lot 2, the home there, and maybe I'd have to reconstruct part of the driveway for lot number 1, but then I would be compliant with both of those properties, and maybe it would be another storm sewer location to pick up water. But again, if the downstream can't handle it, who knows, you would want to put it in there, but then that would require an analysis of adding that additional water to the storm sewer.
you'd also be looking at creating turnarounds and cul-de-sacs.
Yep. You'd have to
So-
do a hammerhead or something for the
Hammerhead,
snow
turn
plow
around,
to turn around.
cul-de-sac.
Yep.
And by the time you do that, you're far more impervious area than what these driveways are.
Okay.
So,
Anyway, that's, just want to make sure we talk about it.
yep.
All right. And we'll carry that as an open item as far as, again, whether any area variances are required as part of this submittal, right? And I think we'll have everybody look at it, and I'm sure you guys will continue to look at it also, all right? As far as on-site water management, I mean, obviously it hasn't been designed yet. You heard about the dry well, whether or not they function, but you're probably thinking swales and bioretention.
I'm
things.
thinking actually one of the things that works incredibly well that we found over the years, and nobody does it anymore. Everybody wants gutters on their house. Putting drip edges with stone drip edges along your foundation and your footing. And you sometimes under drain, piping it to a sump if you need to, and pumping it to another portion of the property. We found that works extremely well for roof runoff, and that takes away about half of the impervious area, and then you're just dealing with the stormwater management along the driveways.
So can you just explain that? Would that look like a retention pond or some other place on the walk?
No. What we would be looking at doing is, you excavate your foundation. You have under drain in your foundation, which goes to a sump pit in your basement. Almost everybody in the town has them. You're going to end up on this site putting those back and pumping them into a low area in the rear of the property instead of pumping it out to the road. You're going to create a basin. They have bubblers. There's a lot of different techniques and things there to create that so that you're picking up any groundwater coming up into your foundation.
But aren't those low areas of that property high areas to the adjacent properties?
No, not necessarily. The property actually pitches both ways, and I can assure you that the amount of land that we have in these 2-acre parcels is more than enough to handle what would come out of a footing drain. And then when we look at what I've done in the past, we've looked at stone drip edges. Instead of putting gutters on your house, you do stone drip edges. Gutters are a maintenance headache anyway, 98% of the time. Allow the water to run off the roof into your stone drip edge, 2 foot wide. Put under drain in that stone drip edge. You can actually run that out. You can create. I've had sites where we've designed, actually excavated the natural soils out and put more stone in so that you've got a reservoir for that. All of this will depend on what my soil testing, when we get out there and do actual soil testing and see. I know it was determined, reputed that there is no infiltration in the soils. I personally want to do that testing myself. But there's bioretention basins too, which you can pitch it into a bioretention basin or a rain garden, which is a shallow depression. Well, it looks like a shallow depression on the surface, but when you construct them, you usually dig out 3 to 6 foot of the natural soils. You replace them with planting soils. It's a mixture of sand, peat, wood chips. There's DEC has very distinct guidelines on those planting soils. Those planting soils work great at absorbing water. You plant them with high volume plantings, red maples. Nobody believes it, but cypress trees work great in those. You don't see cypress trees much in this area. They look beautiful though. They maintain their foliage year round. They pull up a ton of water, and you get not only a peak runoff rate reduction out of that, you also get a volume reduction out of that. And that's how we were able to make other sites meet those volume reduction. There's a lot of techniques out there. I'm well versed in almost all of them, working throughout the Capital District for stormwater management and meeting all of the stringent guidelines of the various municipalities. And we will come up with something that I personally like the rain gardens and the bioretention basins because they don't look like your traditional stormwater management holes. The holes in the ground, as one person described, a large swimming pool with a fence around it. If you look at, and they're very large ones because it's a large site, but Iroquois Manor, the apartments off of Hillside Avenue that we designed, that's all managed by bioretention basins. You can see a couple out front, and then there's one larger one in the back. And if you drive down there after the heaviest rains that we've had in Niskayuna, there's no issues. There's very little ponding water there. Sometimes you see maybe quarter inch, half inch of water, and those goes away very quickly.
Just want to stress, the area you spoke about I don't think has as many historical water damage or insurance claims or problems. And I live on Rao myself. And the gentleman that spoke earlier of the issues they have, I'm hoping to hear, I don't know, this may be unorthodox, but you had mentioned earlier with Queensbury having a net negative, impact. Something in design that might improve the neighbors'
We can do what we can.
water.
I can assure you we're not going to make it worse because that is part of the code and part of the requirements. And it's a difficult situation because to ask them to spend a lot of money to make it better, because this isn't a for-profit project for Mr. Lisi. It's building homes for his family and subdividing lots. There's some value in that, but he's not going in there and trying to create, 25 building lots and make a lot of money off of it.
I know, but it was mentioned earlier that it is an investment. Many
It's
times investment for the family. And I think that there's a lot of history right in this area that you're aware of as a community member. You just know it's a touchy area.
And we'll do what we can to help, to make sure that the problem doesn't get any worse, but to help the problem out. The issue I have is this is an existing problem. I run into this a lot. Major subdivisions, minor subdivisions, historical drainage problems, the drainage requirements, the designs 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when these suburban neighborhoods were initially constructed, it wasn't what they are today. Many of these subdivisions were built on wetlands. You used to be able to impact an acre of wetland. Now you can't impact a tenth of an acre of wetland without a permit. It's times have changed, and we find ourselves as developers and engineers constantly trying to help out the downstream communities the best we can, but certainly we're not going to make it worse under the new guidelines. And that's what I can guarantee we'll give to you.
This, obviously the sketch here doesn't have topo lines, but what's the water, what's it shed like? Does it come down from, like, say, lots 1, 2 toward Vincenzo, or where's the high point on the property?
The high point actually right in here. This tends to pitch this way, and then everything here pitches this way, down into this area.
So you would be able to utilize the backyards of lots 1 and 2 to be able to manage the water?
Yes, we would. The grades aren't that substantial that you wouldn't be able to manage the water there and get the water to those locations. But we would, and doing similar to what was done previously on lot 1 with the stormwater management system along the edges of the driveway, which is really the toughest thing to capture. You can always pitch the drainage around the house. The toughest thing is your house usually always ends up sitting up a little bit higher than the road, and you got the driveway coming down. And the toughest thing to capture is that little section at the end of the driveway.
I just want to reiterate, I think Doug McFadden had indicated that there's a lot more water draining out of Vincenzo.
Yes, I did.
So,
The water comes
yeah, so I just want to
right
make sure that when you keep referring to the existing development and how successful it's been, check that. That's my point. And whatever may have been worked or used, I'm not hearing anything vastly different. So I'm concerned.
I would reserve judgment until we take a look and see if, what the situation is there, and if there is.
Might be a good time to get out there even tomorrow as the melt and the rain and see what's going on too, a little bit, How about snow removal? I mean, the other thing is, these long driveways, you get somebody in there with a plow and pushes it the wrong way, we can end up, with all that snow melt going where you don't want it to go, even though you control the runoff from the roofs in the driveway, and then you move the snow to a spot. And so that's something that, we need to also consider. And again, this is only the sketch, but
when we look at the grading, we can look at that. I mean, you can always, I would typically pitch cross, unlike a road where you'd have a crown section, most driveways are cross slopes. So, and we can make sure that the grades
Yeah.
on the uphill side are indeed uphill.
Yeah, like lot 4, you're gonna wanna, push up St. Gerard Drive and push it to the end probably there. Otherwise, you're gonna have water flow down the stub and out to Row Road, But something that we should be taking a look at also. Make sure, okay?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I ask, I
Yep.
think one of the speakers today, is it Tim Sarantonio? He asked about the development that occurred that removed more trees and did more excavation than originally anticipated on Lot 1. Shane, could you speak to that?
So, sure. The initial plan when Lou was deciding to buy this for the family development, the family plots, the initial plan was for he and my mother-in-law to build their house first, get settled, and then come back to the town for the official subdivision. So in that process of obtaining the building permit, starting to clear the land, starting to put in the temporary driveway for the construction entrance off St. Gerard, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, who were engaged to be married and currently living in Chicago, were actually relocated back to Albany. And it was at about 1.5 to 2 years ahead of when we thought they would be here. They were to be married in May that year. We thought they would get married, and then within a year of their marriage, officially come back to Niskayuna. Spencer's job changed that for the better for them. They were able to relocate back. So in that process, in the family discussion, Lou said, okay, you guys are coming home from Chicago 1.5 to 2 years earlier than I thought you were. So I'll build you guys a house first. And we turned in Lou's building permit for the house off Antonio, and then reapplied for a new building permit for 2520 Vincenzo, which was then granted and approved. And obviously the house is now built. So the initial clearing was done off of Antonio for Lou's, that was going to be he was going to be the first one to build, and that was going to be his plot. And then, like I said, when Spencer and Ellie got relocated back here much sooner than we thought, he decided, let's turn mine in, I'll build you guys a house, and then I'll worry about me later when we go back and further subdivide. So that's why that happened like that. Wasn't intended to all fall into place like that, but that's just the way it did.
Does that mean that lot 3 is already cleared for a foundation? Is that what you're saying?
I would call it lot 4.
Yeah,
There was clearing in through here to get back to this area here, lot 4. So this area, the driveway was cleared, and it was going to be constructed. I think, talked to Laura in Fire District 1 about the width of the driveway and making sure it was strong enough to withstand a fire truck, et cetera. So that area here was what was cleared to get back in here. But no, we stopped the process before a foundation was ever dug. We never got to that point.
And maybe this question's for Ms. Robertson. During the, again, we didn't have to have any approvals because it was strictly a building permit for the original home. Was there any issues identified or concerns that, the board should be aware of that might impact the further subdivision at all?
I'll just tag on to what Shane said. Building permits don't have limits of clearing in the traditional way that we necessarily see like as a subdivision, but there were limits of clearing on the building permit for Luisi's house, and the limits of clearing were extended. And because they were so large, this property for a building permit did receive a SWIP. So that may be what you're getting at. Is that really what you're getting at? Or maybe that's what Tim was talking about. So essentially there was a smaller footprint of clearing for this house than what actually happened out on site. And so the applicant was required to do a SWIP because between the clearing that he had done for the previous house, that the permit was withdrawn, in addition to the clearing that needed to be done for the change of the location of the house. It triggered the need for like a basic SWIP, which was submitted along with the building permit. So there are some studies that were done. I think that ended up winding up into, but you can take a look. They definitely did soil tests for the SWIP, and it does not
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I tend to like to do the soil test myself, but yeah.
Do you have access to that submittal
I do
for?
have access.
Yeah, so I mean, actually, because that building permit had its own SWIP, it was held to the requirement of you have to contain your stormwater, and that's part of the reason that there is that dry swale along the driveway.
There's also, comment regarding, mud and maybe runoff from the construction process, which I know you try to avoid, but we see that, I'm not singling you guys out, I see that other places too, where they, the rains and they come out onto the main road and then they leave the tire tracks and all the mud behind, and obviously they should be doing maintenance to clear that and scrape that up and keep the roadways clear and keep, any runoff on the site, which is done, usually with hay bales or some type of mitigation process, And obviously that's the expectation of this board, is that things are done properly. If they're not, that's that's an enforcement issue, and we can public can always call the office and we can look into that. All right. So I guess I'd like to open. Anybody else have any questions, concerns, direction for the applicant at this point in time? I mean, I think right now we got to get some answers regarding the area variances / flag lots, just make sure we're all on the same page with that. Again, it's, I don't want to say it's only sketch plan approval. It's pretty important because it's going to set the direction for all the engineering to commence. But we need to make sure we come through the area variances, otherwise we can't go forward or not. Right?
Understood.
I think in general, you responded to some of the concerns we heard tonight. But again, we haven't done the engineering yet. So I would encourage the public to continue. We do a real good job, the planning department, and the town does a great job of putting the agenda and all the information on the website, which I think is great. So the public got exactly the same thing that this board has, so that we got to review, and we'll continue to do that anytime this applicant is on the agenda for discussion. So you'll have that opportunity to take a look at that, and I encourage, if you see something, say something, write an email to Ms. Robertson, and we'll take that in consideration as part of the process. And we do that for everybody. That's nothing. That's singling out this application. We do that for all applications or any projects that we see. But, I mean, there's some positive, obviously, is that, you're not coming in with a subdivision. I believe it was 15,000 square foot lots that were approved in that, Laura, in that
Yeah, the
section.
composite sketch.
Yeah.
I put that portion of code in your agenda statement, so you guys have a
Yeah.
chance. I did find that map once. It took me like days to find it.
Yeah.
And I tried to find it in time for the agenda statement, and I could not find it.
So you
But
can,
we do have it. So theoretically, yes, you could.
yeah, so for the public, so you can imagine if the applicant came in and said, okay, we got approval, pre-existing approval for 15,000 square foot lots with the R1 being an 18,000 square foot lot. Yes, you'd still have to do the same engineering to maintain the water on site and hopefully not increase the runoff worse than what it already is, but it'd be a big job. So if you look at, a 4-lot subdivision with large lots, and if it is, a family estate as stated, which that's what you submitted, it's going to, help. I mean, great. It's not better than no development, but but it's minimal development of the property. Is the way I look at it. I'd rather have, if it was me over there, a couple, 4 homes on 2-acre lots versus, I don't know how many homes would you fit there. 7, 8, 10 homes and 15,000 square foot lots, and that's not the situation. So, to me, that's good news. And I don't know, again, that's just me speaking. I always like to hear from everybody else if I'm off base but obviously it's all the proof is in the pudding with all the engineering that needs to be done to make sure that we get a good project and we don't make things worse over there and hopefully improve things.
Absolutely.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions at this point in time?
So I'm just, so this is process, right? This is sketch plan. What I would want you guys to be thinking about is, are there alternatives that you would want to ask the applicant to show? Do we want to see what a cul-de-sacs would look like at the end of Vincenzo and St. Gerard? Do we want to compare, how many lots could fit there versus what he's got here? Is that something that we want to look at before we're okay with this configuration?
Well,
Are we generally speaking okay with this configuration?
I think
That's one thing that we're looking at for sketch plan. And then, we're allowed to ask for contours. I don't know if you feel like we should have contours on this one or not. So things like alternatives, I think things like just confirming all these lots will be public water and sewer.
Yes.
Are we
Right.
confirming that?
Right.
Confirming the way the utilities work. The drainage is definitely something that we'll have to look at. And we do have the ability in our code to look both upstream and downstream, just to make sure that we're capturing everything that we need to capture when we're reviewing the subdivisions. But I think maybe at this point, it would be helpful to them to have a list of questions or things that you would want to see for sketch plan to come back. Or if you're comfortable with this configuration generally, then the next thing would be sketch plan approval. And then we would be working through the engineering issues on classification of a major or a minor. Although Leslie was just asking me, is this a major or a minor? And I mean, we had that question when we were looking at this very large,
Well, and my
side parcel.
concern stems from the fact that it's a good-sized parcel, and because there is, I'd say, more than 50-50 chance at some point, lot number 4 is going to be in for subdivision. And to me, that really means we should treat it like a major.
Well, one of the things there that, in my mind, is something for discussion. If, let's say, so if we can enforce, I think the applicant's proposing 10 years, do nothing with the lot, and at the end of 10 years, then if they want to be further developed, they would have to come in front of this board, whoever's on this board at the time, and follow the rules and regulations that are in place 10 years from now. 10 years, I'd say, from approval of this thing, right? And I don't know if that's better or worse than, looking at it now, because if you do a lot of the engineering now and we, say it's okay and you can fit X number of lots there, and then things change, we might be doing ourselves a disservice in the future when it comes in, because again, the regulations may change, I'm just talking out loud here.
Yeah, just to clarify, so is the proposed restriction that there would be no subdivision on the large lot, or that it just would be, the language I'm looking at in the map says any future subdivision of this parcel within 10 years approval of this minor subdivision will require a major subdivision review? So is it a concession that if there was an application for a subdivision within 10 years of approval, that we'd have to go through this process of whether or not it's a minor or major?
I mean, I'd have to defer to, it was my intent when we discussed that at the meeting, was that if anything, if he decided that he wanted to put a lot in off of, and I'm not sure what the street is, the left there, and put another subdivision line in and sell off that lot, although there are some wetlands over there on that stub street. But if he were to want to do that, then that would throw that one individual lot
floor
require a major subdivision,
right,
because it is a cumulative impact of the 4 lots previous, which is typically how we handle seeker and segmentation. There really is no intent of trying to, in no ill intent to create this master lot, this 11-acre estate lot, to future subdivide it. Lou wants a nice lot there. He wants to build his house there. And that is his intent to reside at that. But at the same time, if that were to ever happen, we're trying to give this board and the town the method to trigger what would, and avoid that argument, well, we're only subdividing 1 lot, it's a minor subdivision. No, you subdivided 4 lots, now you're subdividing an additional lot. That's segmentation. We got to throw it under major review and review it from a cumulative standpoint. And that's how.
And that's the
I think
intent.
the planning board's understanding was that it was a full deed restriction on all 4 of the lots going forward. And it wasn't that you could come before within the 10-year period and make your case. It was more interpreted.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it wasn't.
Because this is the first time the planning board's ever seen this note. But when we had a meeting, when they were bringing the sketch plan in, my concern was just what Leslie had stated, that you put 4 lots in now, and then you come in a year later and you put 2 lots and you classify them both as minor. And that's not okay.
So are you?
We don't.
But he's saying, like, if you put 4 lots in here and then a year later you decide to put a lot off of Van Antwerp, that you have to treat the entire thing as major. I think that we have to flesh it out a little more. Because there's things that we're missing when we see maybe it gets classified as major now, but do we get parklands for all 5 lots then? Parkland fees? Like, there's quite a big difference between major and minor, and there's differences in trunk fees, and there's like quite a bit of different that is money and review that's taken between major and minor. So that was, let's take a stab at the concern that was brought up to
We have to mitigate
to us.
it. Yeah.
But I don't think that we had said no further subdivision at all for 10 years. That is a conversation, but I don't think that was the direction that we gave the applicant.
Even if we were putting in the deed that there could be no additional subdivision for 10 years, if that were the intention.
Yeah.
But you're
Well,
saying that that's not how you think that would be
I
written?
don't, so I guess there's a couple things going on, right? I think the concern that we were talking about is, are we asking for no further subdivision when we see these minor subdivisions? Like, are we saying, and I know that Lou himself came, or maybe it was Teresa Beckner, not sure, one of the two, came and said, you can't put like a plat note that says no further subdivision isn't legally enforceable in court. So you have to do some kind of deed restriction that is recorded to the lots, and the subdivider has to, okay, I am deed restricting these lots. So if we're talking about a thing that says any future subdivision, for minor subdivision will require major, that is not a deed restriction. We are not talking about a deed restriction with a plat note like that. If we're saying.
But if that, just pause for a second. If we're not talking about a deed restriction, then I look at that. as
Yeah,
a
how do we
major.
accomplish it?
Well, that's what I
It's
was
only a
saying.
major.
That's not what this note is getting at, is deed restriction, yeah. I mean, one of the things that the CAC did not get a chance to review, the applicant wasn't before the CAC, they just got a copy of the subdivision because sometimes they get calls about stuff ahead of time. But they were looking at lot 1 and lot 2. Lot 1 and lot 2, they are 2 acres and 2.3 acres, and they were concerned that at some point in the future, you could fit a house behind that.
Exactly.
And so I don't know if,
That could be.
we can talk with the applicant, but you might want to ask for a deed restriction for lot 1 and lot 2, and maybe even lot 3, so that you're not
As the
seeing
future owner of
houses.
lot 2, I have no intentions of
Yeah,
myself.
and that's a good point.
putting somebody
Yeah,
behind
but
I think
we
that's your
want,
point,
we want
too.
a deed restriction,
But that's-
not the
So
intention.
those
because
ones
we've
might
got
be deed
intentions
restrictions, so that we're not looking at wild area variances in the future, because you could combine that and put like 3 houses back there and access it off of the lands of Polsinelli or something.
Yep.
Those ones actually might make sense for deed restrictions, but
Yeah, well, that's
he
1,
was
2, and
saying
3.
lot 4, he did not want to deed restrict because there's a potential to do something, and then that's the trigger. That's the question is
It's a major.
it a major or a minor? I don't know. Actually, I really think that there might be some legal things to look into, but his note for future subdivision note was an attempt at solving that, and that's something that we were talking about at sketch plan.
All right.
And I will say that note was, in my thought process on this, when it was brought up in the meeting, I've seen municipalities who actually have written into their minor subdivision code, if there are any there's certain timeframes with the amount of time that you can present lots and size of lots and, in that subdividing. So if you do 5 lots in 7 years, it may kick it into a major subdivision. And I'm just kind of throwing those numbers out there, but I have seen in other municipalities where they've had it written in there. And it's my intent to try to create that on this plat that, hey, listen, we're not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes and say, oh, we're going to come in for one and we're going to come in for another and we're going to come in for another. We want to do this as, we want to put a note in there that says, hey, listen, we're not coming in. And if we do, you're going to treat us like a major subdivision, and we're going to have to go back. We're going to have to look at the cumulative impacts. We're going to have to analyze this as a major subdivision. And that was the intent of what we're trying to create by this.
In terms of timing though, so in the context of analyzing the setback, potential need to go to the zoning board of appeals, I think it would be helpful if we had clarity on whether or not Mr. Lisi would be willing to do a potential deed restriction for lot 1 and 2.
And 3.
So that way we're not the keyhole lot issue.
And
It's gonna be before zoning board.
well, the keyhole, the whole flag.
But if we had a deed restriction, we wouldn't have to be worrying if,
Correct.
is this going to create bad precedent in the area? And all.
For 2, 1, and 3.
Yeah, so it would be twofold. It would be one to, address concerns related to whether or not this is going to lead to subsequent subdivisions. And then 2, it would also help in the context of a potential application for a variance, because it would be a narrow scope when looking at like potential change in the neighborhood.
I'd also like to offer my support for the idea that was proposed by a couple members already tonight for the possibility of extending the stub streets. I think that kind of addresses some of the concerns about future development, and it also could potentially reduce the need for variances.
I actually think it'd make the future development potentially worse.
Worse in which way?
And that you could open up that whole corridor for continue. This almost precludes the site from ever, without ripping down houses, from ever going back and going into those smaller lots. If we were to run a cul-de-sac in and do 100 foot of frontage, there's the possibility that you could end up with more future development on the site. We're essentially cutting off access from both those locations.
Well, the applicant's representative has already indicated that there could be a desire within 10 years
Multiple
to
times.
further develop for other family members.
After 10 years, So the thought is even 10 years from now, if there's a potential for development,
The road
you know,
goes in.
why not, start showing it now and include that, at least to the extent practicable in the process. Again, I know it's cost and everything, but that's something we need to talk about not just the fact that, hey, if I build the road 100 feet into lot number 4, well, now that I built that road, well, I'm going to want to get some return on investment, so I'm going to want to subdivide more. I think that's kind of what you're saying, right?
I mean, I'm not saying that that's what he's going to want to do.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
And when you build a road, I mean, roads are not cheap. Roads are, they're approaching $600 a foot.
And there's drainage
construction.
that's required for roads.
And there's drainage.
And then those go downstream to collection that maybe the capacity is not there to support.
I would agree.
So therefore, that might tell us something.
And that is one of the reasons we're trying to prevent.
Yeah, there's two ways of looking at it, right? It might tell us something now,
But if we-
or
if
when
we-
the day that comes 10 years from now, we decide to develop lot 4, we're going to have to address it all then.
We are designing this site, and the site is being designed from day one to try to minimize any potential impacts on downstream property.
Except for a deed restriction on future development of 4. And if you did deed restrictions for all of them, then I'd be okay with it. I think.
In Mr. LaFlame, I'm not saying that 4 is ever going to become developed. I'm not saying that 50 years from now, somebody might not want to come in and develop that. We'll all be gone. But at the same time, we're taking in, we're creating a restriction on 11 acres of land. Well, let's call it 7 or 8 acres of land that is something that, why? For what reason? If that were to happen in the future, they would have to address those drainage issues. Maybe the drainage issues would have been fixed by then. We don't know. Things change.
Yeah, my point is it might be worse by then, and it might require, maybe the subdivision would be even less intense as a result of what occurs in the future. I don't know.
And I don't know. I can't say, but the applicant is not willing to put a deed restriction on that portion of the property just because there is a value
Right.
associated with that for his family as he leaves it. And
All right. But let's discuss though with the applicant, lot 1, 2, and 3, as we just stated, having deed restriction on a future subdivision on 1, 2, and 3, so that we don't end up with.
I can't answer that without.
Yeah, I know, I understand. Just carry it as an open item. And then also, I think the suggestion is to extend the road, and as Mr. McPartland said, at least have the discussion, the pros and cons, and we'll have internal discussion on that also, and obviously in meetings, as part of this process, right? But I think the main thing is, that and coming through whether or not area variances are required, make sure we're on the right page, otherwise we don't go forward. We have to make a recommendation to the zoning board of appeals. And I can't speak for them, but I would say that one of the things is you got a clean slate here. So I think it would be tough with the zoning board of appeals having a clean slate, and they might come back and say, how come you're not putting the road in, making them all conforming? Because that would be one way to mitigate any area variances, right, also. So, I don't know, Laura, does that answer your question at all?
Right, yeah, so I think if we're not ready to call for a vote on sketch plan, and I know that we do like to take time on these when there's a lot of, concern and drainage and history to the project,
Yep.
but we definitely want to give the applicant questions and things that they can work on to come back to
Yep.
us. So to be clear, and I'm just going to summarize what you just said, we would like to see if there's, if he's willing to deed restrict lot 1, 2, and 3 for no further deed restrictions. We understand that lot 4 is not included. He made that very clear to us. Then we would like to see an alternate sketch plan that includes an extended road or cul-de-sac that would serve the lots. I'm hearing that.
Yeah, and the pros and cons, I mean, you don't have to do a large analysis, it's $600 a foot, versus the cost of a driveway, what's the,
my concern is less cost, but more drainage.
Well-
and
More impervious
environmental
surface.
impacts.
Yep.
But that's okay, because at sketch plan, we're just looking at alternatives.
Yep.
So
Right.
if you bring in the alternative and then we're like, whoa, that does not make any sense.
Well, we're trying-
Okay, but at least we're looking at it.
Sorry to interrupt, but the main purpose is the avoidance of the variance, meaning these are like Chairman said, these are
If,
the clean
if
slot,
there's a required, we'll get
clean
to.
plot of land.
Yeah.
That's
These are
something that needs to be straightened.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
exactly.
the staff in
before
the
that.
meantime, will review whether or not the
They're
area
flagpole.
variance is
They're
required.
all flagpole.
And we'll be in touch with you too through the planning officer. I know you're in frequently for things, so we'll be talking about that. Okay.
And then the only other thing I heard that, and Kevin mentioned, but I'm just summarizing, is we understand that you're not doing the full engineering, but it might be worth it to take a closer look at the limits of clearing so that we can just have a better sense of that.
Understood. Yeah, that's something we can certainly do.
And then that's also the half an acre, tightening up that number, be more realistic for the short form as stated by the public and
Yeah, and
ourselves.
I mean, that's a CAC thing, but you probably do want to look at your answer to 17. It's probably yes,
It's
and then
probably
you
yes.
want to look at A and B for,
17 is what?
will the proposed action create stormwater discharge, either from point or non-point sources? The answer to that is yes, but then will stormwater discharge flow to adjacent properties? Well, hopefully your answer would be no.
It'd be no, because
And
you're
then
going
will
to keep it on site.
stormwater, yeah. I definitely agree with Mr. Chang. You want to relook at that question.
Okay.
Well, we're talking about alternatives. I think I have just a lot of questions, more questions than answers right now about how lot 4 could look. It's pretty clear to me, lot 1, 2, and 3, they're 2-acre building lots, and I like the look of that. Those are nice, large estate lots, as it's been represented here. Lot 4 sounds like somewhat of an unknown right now. And so I guess my first question would be, what are the other access points or road frontages for lot 4? And are there any other potential alternative access points that the applicant is considering now or might consider in the future to lot 4? And along with that, I think understanding the grade and slope of this very large lot and how potential long drives and access points to this lot might play into the existing slope, I would find it very useful to understand.
Is it a potential for Van Antwerp to have an access in the future off of Van Antwerp? Is it all wet there?
It's wet. There's a stream and wetlands on
Hmm.
that corner of the parcel. There's a stream that runs back through here along these property lines.
Yeah. And the St. Gerard Drive, that's not off of Antonio on the other end, is that a stub road now, or is it just a paper street, or
It's a dead
Paper
end, right?
Street.
it's a paper street?
That's Paper Street, yeah.
I don't think there's
Antonio
any
Drive is a
there.
paved dead end. I've heard.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the
No,
south,
on the one side off Antonio, it's a stub. I'm talking about the other side.
On the other side.
is it a stub too? Oh, it is a stub too.
Paper. So that's the Mr. McPartland's point is, future development would, how would you get in there? Can you get in there?
Right.
Or would, someday would the St. Gerard Drive off Antonio would have to be extended to say, even if you were to do estate-sized lots, working around the wetlands, maybe you get, 3-4 more large lots in there, in the future.
It's a stub, but it's not a very long stub compared to like St. Gerard. It's like a
It's like
tiny
a-
stub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the intent always was for.
Do you already have a
to connect.
topo map that was previously done on this?
We do
from-
have a topo map. We can add the contours. We can show
Yeah.
approximate wet areas on the site.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great. I
That'd
mean,
be helpful.
I hate to say anybody chasing, but I think it's really important that we at least, we can visualize.
Give you an idea
Yeah.
of what the potential.
That would be great, so we can carry that. Laura's an open eye, but would appreciate that.
Yep. I think that's a really good idea.
Yep.
And then the only other thing I said is like, you've got the existing sanitary sewer main there, but I don't know what the width of the easement is. It's probably good to put the width of the easement
Okay.
on there to make, just
Yeah, I'm
because
not
of
sure
the
what
potential house footprint is actually pretty close to that sewer line.
Yeah.
So you would want to double check that.
Okay.
So, yeah, and lot 4 and 3 would be served by the utility and the main and the water that comes from Rao?
No,
No,
from
some Saint Germain.
Okay, so
lot-
2 and 1 are
So
served.
lot 2, the water main was extended, and now stubs with a new fire hydrant.
there was already a pre-existing electrical connection on either side of Vincenzo Drive that we were able to tap into. And then National Grid extended the gas main in, and then we installed a new sewer, we extended the sewer line as well.
Just
And put
for
a-
those two.
Yeah, that's private.
And put a manhole in. So that's what my comment earlier about.
Construction.
The infrastructure work in Vincenzo Drive has already been done.
But the infrastructure work for 3 and 4 has not been done.
No,
That's
there's been no utilities have been extended beyond, although there is an existing sewer.
The sewer is already there, it runs right through the.
It does.
I mean, that's gravity, right? You would
Yeah.
probably just tie right into that, but you do need to know what the width of the easement is.
Yeah, we can find out what the width of the easement is and just make sure that.
So I think these are all reasonable
Yeah.
requests, right?
No, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And Laura, can I ask maybe Alexis, to one of the speakers who just left, Mr. McMinn, mentioned a lawsuit and a settlement in terms of the, I mean, I don't know if we could get an inquiry as to the status of what the impact was, what the causation was. I don't know. I mean,
Could you,
that might-
could we keep it down out there, please? A moment. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that. We also, Clark did do some research for me ahead of time on the Homestead subdivision, which is on the lands now formerly of Polsinelli, and they had done some downstream analysis, and we can give that to the applicant just to see if that's helpful as well. So yeah, we can take a look at that surrounding history of drainage.
My recollection is there was one house that got flooded after the homeowner changed the basement and made it a walkout that had not been approved. So I don't know if it's the same house or not, but there's a reason the town doesn't encourage those.
Yeah, that may have been.
You're out of order, sir.
Yeah, we,
I know I
yeah,
wanted,
we'll take that up later, okay? Or we could take it up at the next privilege. of the
that's
floor.
something to check.
It's
I
just a
don't
comment.
recall what the property was. I just know it's been an issue. And the town wouldn't let me put in a first floor deck because it would have messed up the drainage if I had to have a second floor deck.
In your backyard?
Yep.
All right, so sounds like we got, some things to work on, right?
Understood.
We're not ready for sketch plan. The biggest item obviously is, working with you between now and the next meeting on whether there's a need for area variances, because that could change things dramatically. And I know that would be important to you guys also,
I
obviously.
think that's the most important
Right.
thing we need.
And we'll come through that, and then we'll put it on the agenda again, and we'll summarize those. And if we feel like we're ready, then we could talk about whether there's a sketch plan approval at that time, whether we got enough information. Basically the comments that we had, I don't want to say rebuttal, but your response to those comments, and then we could keep the project moving forward at that point in time. I think that's reasonable.
So we're just, Kevin, just for timing, the first meeting in January, right? Because there's no other meeting in December.
Right, correct. That would be January 13th, the next meeting we'd pick up. So we have some time to come through those things. And I know everybody's having fun during holidays and everything, so.
Yeah.
January 13th will be here quickly,
Yes.
So, and that's if you're ready to be put back on agenda. If there's still some open items, and you feel that you need some further discussion in the engineering department or planning department or legal department, well, we could always not put it on the agenda and keep till we're ready to bring it back too, We'll work with you on that, all right?
Sounds good.
But again, there is some positive due to large lots, it's a positive thing. It isn't like you're coming in for many homes there, which would definitely have, I feel, have an impact in the neighborhood and would be an engineering challenge. So there are some good aspects of this project. So that's my personal view. I don't know if anybody else has anything. And Ms. Gold will continue to sit in, since Mr. Oster recused himself, she'll sit in for all aspects of this project as we go forward as an alternate. Okay. Is there anything else, Laura, that you have or anybody on the board?
No, I think that's good. I think if you guys have any questions, we'll try and summarize, I think the things we talked about to an email or.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll talk to Lou and start the process on, those questions and be prepared, so.
Yep.
Absolutely.
It's great. You can watch the video.
That's it. That's
On
right.
YouTube, which is another great thing.
Oh, good.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
All
I
right,
appreciate
thank
your
you.
time this evening.
No, thank you. All right. All right, next up, we have discussion items is zoning code amendments. And
So I did this as an interesting, I thought it was an interesting discussion item. But essentially what I was thinking is I took the last list of things that we had talked about amending the zoning code with, and then I added in a couple of things that we had talked about, for instance, at the last meeting when we were concerned about the 1,000-foot buffer to schools and daycares for the ban on tobacco. just making that clearer and also including vaping and marijuana products, like just very clearly. So I know that that's a big driver of the zoning code amendments, but we have been kicking these all around. So my thought is that we could go through them and say, yeah, let's bring that one back, or no, like we're not really ready for that, and we should move this forward. But I did want to clarify for the public, number 8
Yeah, 8.
does not, zoning immunity is actually a state law, and it is obviously always going to supersede anything that we put in our code, but it's more of a clarification when the county comes in and does things such as the solar arrays or such as the Knott Street. I don't know if the Knott Street project actually would, but this is actually more pertaining to the solar arrays. It would give us a clearer way of handling what we do when a outside municipality comes in and wants to do something within the town's jurisdiction. So that's not an intent to, I believe I heard like the town employees taking over. That's not what that is at all. It's a clarification of the state law as zoning immunity applies to the town of Niskayuna. And it would, if we did it, and I'm not even sure that, I mean, we could talk about whether or not we do it, but if we did it, it would be just to clarify that state law process. We don't supersede it. It would basically just be helpful. And then.
So it's already state law?
It's already state law, yeah.
Why are we discussing it?
Well, because whenever it happens, it's kind of confusing. So I just feel like it would be helpful to have a process in our code that says X, if X happens, we do. You know, we will. This is how it works. We wouldn't have to do it. It is governed by state law. It's essentially like seeker is governed by state law. We have a seeker process, and then we have a town seeker code, which is hopefully supposed to clarify it for how it applies within our boundaries. How well our seeker code is doing that right now, it's probably up for grabs. But theoretically, that's what it should do. You have a state law that does the zoning immunity, and then we would just clarify how it's applied within our town on that. This is not granting ourselves any extra power. 13, to add setbacks, that is just because they're not in, I think it was an oversight, they're just not in the graphic. Like all zoning districts have setbacks, and when they redid the CN graphic thing, there are no setbacks called out. If we want them to be 0, we can call them out as 0. We just don't have any. It's very unusual, and it causes problems for applications to come through with nothing. And then just to clarify, if we said, okay, CN probably needs a setback of 5 or 10 feet, and there are existing businesses in a CN zoning district that are on the lot line, they are grandfathered in. That is not a problem for them. They are not shut down. They are not required to move their buildings that existed for 100 years back 10 feet. That's just for future development that's coming in to make sure that, to make sure that they actually have setbacks and we know what we're doing with them, because it's not good to have blanks in our zoning code. And I just wrote down, I know, well, we can talk about chickens.
Right. Well, one thing I went through all these and read the paperwork, of course, and there's quite a bit here. And I was just thinking processes, obviously it's going to take the planning department, legal department, quite a bit of work to do these, and not to mention public hearings and then any cost to amend the ordinance, whether it's online or paper, however we do all that, right? Is there any way is there like some that are like easy that we should group together and just say, hey, they're no brainers, we all agreed, so we just do the easy ones? And then ones that may be a little bit more difficult. So I kind of went through the list and said, hey, that's easy. It shouldn't be controversial, and some way to knock them off.
That's the question, but we have been kicking around like Airbnb and chickens for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
Those to me were on the harder part of the thing.
That's why we've been kicking them around.
Right. So since we talked about Jay, I think the first thing is, what's our position? Are we okay with having?
Yeah, that's my
That's the
thought.
big
We
question,
could
right?
literally go through each bullet point and be like, yeah, now's a good time to address it. Or, okay, Laura, that's important, but that's going to take a lot of time. So maybe we'll put that one on the next.
Maybe it would be helpful to see which ones actually require amendment to the code and which ones are just resolution that we could do. So just looking at this, couldn't we make the training requirements just an internal policy of the town? And that would be as simple as not even a reso. It could just be go through.
Do you want to go down, want to go through the list?
Yeah, let's go through
Let's
the
go
list.
through it, and
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
we'll approach that one, Alexis, when we
So
get
I would
there,
say
okay?
adding an architectural review board. I mean, if we're giving them power and authority, then we could add a chapter to the code, but we could also just do it through a resolution.
Yeah, it was actually proposed as a resolution.
Yeah, so that one
that's
would be
why
easy.
Yeah, that one's here, but
So we
I
don't need
didn't
a
know
public
if we were
hearing or
amending the
anything.
code, if we would want to actually put it in the code now, or if we would want to just do the resolution, see how it works, and then if we need to do code amendments later, we could.
Do we need to have the code amendment or just the resolution in order to invoke the architectural review board?
We just need a resolution.
Yeah, the architectural, David and I looked at this, the architectural review board used to be in our code. Then when we were looking at it, we're like, oh, it looks like you can do it by resolution, or we could put it back in our code.
And resolution would work for applicants coming in. It would be clear to them to make sure we don't run into any situations where, hey, I didn't know how to do that. And they-
Well, so that's the issue though, because if you make it as a resolution, resolutions don't show up when people are researching. our
Researching the code, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
If we had people who were ready to start and we wanted to get this board moving, we could do it by resolution with understanding that we'd be doing a code amendment.
Yeah. I think eventually you have to do a code amendment for.
Yeah, no, I think it would be good just to have.
I think we were talking
Yeah,
about
that
like
would be-
trying to get it rolling in front of the 2019 building season, which I apologize.
Well,
guys.
So, I
But
mean, we got, thanks for your work on this too. Do you think we have the staffing and everything to go forward?
I believe I gave you 5 potential candidates.
yeah, I mean, we actually had quite a lot of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want to do a recommendation on this for the first January meeting for the town board?
So what we did, and I apologize. I know this is a lot to throw at you, and we're gonna have very busy meetings, I think, for a little while. But is we brought this to you guys for recommendation to the town board, so that it would have a planning board recommendation to
Yep.
the town board. And I believe at the time there were still some questions on this resolution, and we haven't resolved that. So the process would be, you guys would be saying yes to this resolution, or say, yeah, town board, we reviewed it, go ahead and recommend it, just to make the process more robust. And then they would do that. So we could pull that one out, make that a separate recommendation from the planning board on January, and then maybe
Okay.
have a public hearing and talk about it in February. I know David has actually done presentations to the
Yep.
town board on it, but when I brought it to you guys for recommendation, and I can go back and listen and find those minutes, there was
Yeah.
definitely some outstanding questions.
I mean, in general, I support it, right? Whether we do a resolution now and then later on do the code amendment to make it part of our zoning code, chapter 220 or whatever, I'm okay with that. Obviously, this is where we stood. It was included in the packet, the draft resolution,
Mhm,
right?
This is
So
where we left it.
the only, I re-reviewed it. The only thing that I came up with, is like we're on the back page or second page. Do we need to have alternate members of the architectural review board? That wasn't addressed. I just was wondering whether there's any benefit there in case, people move or, again, I don't know how staffing will be. It seems like we would like to have alternates in case, conflict of interest or recuse themselves, whatever. So anyway, it's just food for thought. And then we also left open the size of family, referred to projects in single-family homes above whatever square footage, to pick a number. So I don't know, I just threw a number out, 2,000 square feet. I mean, it seems like, is that, maybe that's too little, or is it too
No,
much?
That's too much, because I think with that one, we're talking about what you're seeing is additions, right?
Right, okay, because we had like carport additions where we had some
Yeah.
issues where, it was going to be change the character of the neighborhood.
Yeah, you're
Instead-
probably talking like 200 square.
Yeah,
feet.
you're probably talking, was a typical garage door 9 foot by, 20 foot, 9 by 17. So it's got to be somewhere, at least somewhere in that area, right? Maybe great, I don't know.
100, yeah, so I mean, we actually changed the way that we govern sheds when they're over 120 square feet. I mean, maybe we just be consistent and say
Yeah.
120 square feet, because that's a trigger between a major and a minor accessory structure.
Okay. And then the other things I just thought was, and the architectural review board will issue a report for a recommendation to the planning board or the town board, depending on this, is that?
Sure.
And it would be it's a recommendation, right?
It would be like any other committee.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't think you necessarily need to have alternates on there. If you had a board of 5 or 3 to 5,
Yep.
then committee members could pick and choose which projects they wanted to work on. If it's something that's a major subdivision, they may all want to get in on it. Or it may be something minor where
Yep.
Laura says, hey, this is just a small addition to a house, and member number one wants to take it.
Yep,
They,
no.
they can meet with them.
I'm good with all that, okay? So it's a report for consideration. What about if we run into a situation where, say, the applicant disagrees with is there a way for contesting?
Oh, like an appeal process?
Appeal process, right?
I don't know that they're, under the resolution, I'm not sure that the architectural review board's recommendations are binding though, are they?
No, they're not.
Yeah, so the only time that you would be entitled to an appeal would be if something was binding, and then you could go to the zoning board of appeals.
All right. So if architectural review board made a recommendation for some condos or townhouses or whatever, and we, the planning board said, hey, we agree, that's good, you know? And the applicant says, hey, that's way too much money, that's ridiculous. Where do they go if?
So that is a planning board decision, and you can say, I'm protecting the character of my community and listening to my architectural review board, and you are required to build it this way.
Right.
And then if they feel that that's an unjust decision, they have an appeal process to go through the planning board decision.
They
So-
have the same power of like the
Yeah,
city council.
so the
or-
architectural review board's recommendation is not binding, but if the planning board chooses to take it, that's when the recommendation becomes binding, and then they either
Okay.
have the ability
I just wanted to
argue
make sure we
it.
talked about it. I'm not,
Yeah.
again, I don't think there's a problem, but I just want to make sure. So that was the only things I came up with, square footage. I agree with you about the alternate not requiring it. And my opinion is if Dave, you're comfortable, and Laura, and,
Can I just ask one quick question? Scope and powers, second paragraph, third sentence. Other projects requiring planning board approval may request an additional review. Who's doing the requesting there? I'm not sure I understand that sentence.
It should probably be the planning board requesting the architectural review, and then we charge the applicants $200.
That's the thinking behind it?
I think the
planning
thinking,
board.
yeah, so I think the thinking was if a project from the planning board got kicked into the architectural review board, that was gonna be a lot of extra work, and staff. So that cost should be borne by the developer in some way, which would be an additional $200 fee to be reviewed by the architectural review board.
Okay.
But that fee would not apply to, like
Resident-
family home residential
Right.
permits.
Right.
So maybe we
So
should
maybe for-
reword that
You have to
sentence.
reword that because I just didn't know who was making the
that's
request.
that's a
Okay.
good comment. I did have that one circled also. It'd be like a commercial applicant would be required to, for townhouses, condos, the medical office, whatever, would require a $200 fee, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
mhm.
Correct.
Yep.
But maybe, like you say, like clarify it, like,
Yep.
site plans. I don't know. It seems like it's almost too discretionary to have the planning board request that an applicant go to a commission and then pay more money. It seems like it should just
Be
say,
part of the process.
site, unless it's a tenant change and they're not changing any of the facades or something, all site plan approvals have to be referred to the architectural review board for $200. And maybe sometimes there'll be less architectural review done for things that are smaller. And then maybe sometimes the $200 probably isn't actually covering all the work that's to be done, but at least it's fair and consistently applied unless you do it by square footage or something.
No,
Yeah, and I think that's the intent. If you look at the comprehensive plan 2013, it says, the building department will refer permits projects to the architectural review board, which will act as an extension.
Yeah, yeah. When it was
Not really
originally in the
same
code,
thing.
that's.
Yeah, so time of application would be when it would get referred, right? So, well, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I had just seen one thing too. Do you think that we should just change timely fashion and put some sort of a parameter on it? So we can also set an expectation for the applicant?
Yeah, where's that?
Last paragraph.
Last paragraph.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably, I feel like it's,
Just because everybody's interpretation of timely fashion might be, like an applicant might think timely is, I'm going to have it back by the end of the week, but that's
I would
not
like to
necessarily.
say, 30 to 60 days. Although I know, but generally speaking, I think you turn it around faster than that.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, what we wanted to do was avoid an application coming in and getting caught in limbo between zoning board meetings. I mean, we meet with more frequency, so it would probably be easier for an
Yeah.
applicant going through the planning board, but sometimes the zoning board only meets once a month,
Yep.
or if there's a delay.
It's
or
like the
something.
Conservation Advisory Council. same
Or
thing.
even putting like the worst case, within 90 days or
Yeah, 60
whatever,
days.
Well, I
just
think-
so that way it's some sort of.
30 might in some situations be too small,
Right.
but I think
So
you'll never go
45 to
over
60?
60. So, I mean, I don't know if you either say 30 to 60 days or you just say not to exceed
Not to
60 days.
Not to exceed 60 days, I think would give you a little bit of buffer in case a meeting is not scheduled.
What do we say for the tree council or the CAC?
They actually don't have that in their bylaws.
They don't have an actual
No.
timeframe?
No.
Okay.
We're doing a as project basis.
I agree. I think that's good, not to exceed the 60 days is
Yeah.
fair. It's got to be fair to the applicant. I think that's reasonable.
We figured something large we would see anyways, but this would be helpful. Like we had a project that came up where the guy wanted to do the subdivision by the veterinarian.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would have hit the ARB first. Then it might not have even made it to us. I mean, there might be something like that where not that necessarily it's going to save us time, but they would vet it out in the beginning. And then Laura can say, okay, the ARB's looked at this. They have the following concerns. We see it. We can refine it and maybe not keep an applicant here as long. Or they may just say at that point, hey, we're going to start over, do something different, and maybe economize our time a little bit.
Yep. Okay. I don't want to rush this along, but I think if we need to, we got a draft
Got 15 more to go.
resolution. We got some comments, right? So why don't we incorporate the comments?
Yeah, okay, so I'm hearing for number one, we will bring back an updated resolution as a separate recommendation item to the town board at our
Yep.
next meeting.
Or we could do it, I mean, if everyone's comfortable with this substance, we don't want to wait until January planning board and then now February town board meeting. If you want to get this ball rolling, we could do a resolution. I could circulate it to you guys to reflect all the comments made and then present it to the town board in January.
We could do that also. I just would ask that, obviously Dave, get an opportunity to look at it or all of us, right? To make sure we're okay with it. Yep.
So we can actually do both in January. We could talk about it at the town board on the agenda meeting, have the recommendation on the January 13th, and then have them be ready to take action on it if everyone's happy at the end of the month of January.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
The nominees would have to be appointed and go back to the town board, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have to actually appoint the committee. They just need to have the resolution.
Yeah, I mean, this resolution is not set up for names. Theoretically, the names would come after, although if we do
But you have them.
if I reach out to all those people, you could put
Yeah.
the names in ahead of time. I did get a good amount of people
Yeah.
emailing me about the ARB
Yeah,
before.
you could have the resolution and the first members of the committee
Mhm.
recommend it, and they could approve it all at one shot.
And it's a good start to the new year as well. I mean, starting 2020 with it in place.
Okay. So that sounds good, and then we'll hold off on, when we do a major revision to the code, we'll also include whatever referencing that in the code at that point in time, all right? All right. Personally, the language, I thought this one, 1,000-foot buffer to schools and daycares include tobacco, vaping. I think we're all on board with that one, from what I heard from when we had the CBD discussion. It's just to make sure there's something we don't miss that sits out there that we're, who knows what's out there, but we do the best we can to make sure it's all inclusive, right?
Do we put language like other substances
Yeah, we
in
could.
the spirit of, do we do something like that? Because we know that marijuana was illegal and there's aspects of it that are not. It could be something else tomorrow.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of.
The point here is that even with marijuana or medical marijuana, we don't want those within 1,000 feet of school,
Right.
right? That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't have a problem with that, I think.
Yeah.
So it's just, how do we do that? Is that is that a resolution or is that a code?
That's a code amendment.
That's a code amendment.
Definitely.
Okay. And so that's going to take a public hearing? in order to
Yeah,
do
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Okay, so we should probably group maybe the public hearing ones together. Maybe we have if we can we have a public hearing on?
Alternatively, we want to keep the momentum on this since it was just the CBD issue was brought to the planning board's attention. This is something that would be relatively easy to just bring to the town
No,
board's.
sorry, guys, we cannot do that. If we're amending the zoning code.
No, it's definitely,
Yeah.
I'm saying if we don't want to wait until I group them together.
No,
We want
I
it to
would-
go to the town board.
Because it's actually very expensive to do them piecemeal.
Why?
So what happens, and there's a legal requirement every time we amend the zoning code, it's a type 1 seeker action. So it has to go to the CAC for a full environmental assessment. We have to hold a public hearing. The town board has to hold a public hearing. It is anything that you want to see that changes in the zoning code, we should
We-
group
we
together
group
now.
together.
These
Yep.
are not separate amendments. We are amending the
Okay,
zoning
well-
code, and these are the things that we're looking at.
So let's fly.
So, but the question is yeah, we heard 1,000-foot buffer. If we're opening up the zoning code for amendment, these are other things we talked about. What do you want us to put in there? But we definitely can't do that. And it also costs the clerk a lot of money because every time we do a zoning code amendment, we have to reprint all of our zoning codes and pay the people to update our website. So like internally, because of costs and because of just the legal process for amending our zoning code, it's not the same as any of our chapters.
All right,
New
so,
York State says if you amend your zoning code, it is a secret type 1 action. So you have like a whole bunch of stuff you have to do.
so we're good with that, so we'll group it, but we need to have the words to review, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so-
that's why I'm saying on these items, like, yes, we know we want to bring back the 1,000-foot items. Are you guys okay with us bringing back, reducing the fees for tenant change?
I have a question on the medical marijuana dispensaries. Do we have jurisdiction to limit where they go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You can't say there's nowhere in town they can go, but you can say, you know, for these reasons, they can't be within 1,000 feet of schools. You can't say blanket.
Yeah, you can't disallow them
Yeah.
completely, similar to the adult industry,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that's allowed in our
Office technology and
office
light
technology
industrial
area.
district.
Exactly. Same
It's a
thing, same exact thing.
Wild part of our code right there.
And 1,000 feet, where does that number come from?
So NCAP actually did a study on that and presented some data that they're the ones that wrote that part of the code, actually.
So that's a reasonable walking distance. Anything beyond that is not reasonably accessed.
Yeah, so they showed studies to the town board that showed that, you know, a certain proximity of eye-level products was creating a higher level of use among teenagers. I'm not sure that those studies exist for marijuana, but it's probably okay to extrapolate theoretically, because you have those numbers for tobacco.
Do we want to make sure we clarify too, the 1,000-foot buffer from the property lines of the schools? Or the
It
school
is
front door?
clarified. It's that in that way in the code.
I know, I think that the school, when I looked up, when I was seeing if there was anything about CBD, they had from the front door and when they define
In our code, currently, the 1,000-foot buffer is from property lines.
from the property line.
If you saw a map of somebody doing it from the building, that would have been an incorrect map, and hopefully the planning department would catch that and say you have to do 1,000 feet from the property lines.
So for that one, we'll get the updated words and we will group that with other ones so that we can do it all once, once we get the words.
Yeah,
make sure
these
we're-
all would be updated words.
Yep.
I'm just seeing what the
Yep.
appetite is for them.
I mean, it's obviously the limiting factor is you guys, because you got a lot of work to do to get that to us, All right, move on. The tenant change, I mean, that seems like a great thing. I don't see anybody could argue with that. Reducing a fee, right? And again, is if that requires a code amendment and a public hearing and all those things, and get the words and, which seem like they're pretty straightforward, and let's just group that with the other ones, right?
Okay.
Does that sound good? Yep.
Yeah, and ad hoc and alternate is just, essentially just typographical.
Yep, same
So if you
thing.
guys-
Yep,
yeah.
group it, yep.
Established.
Yeah, number 5, training requirement for alternate members of the planning board and ZBA. Now, they're already following the training requirements, right, everybody? Even though,
Our planning board alternates are very good. But our state code doesn't clarify the training for alternates. So we wanted to have something that clarified the training for our alternates.
I mean, it's just, and that's the 4 hours, annual, right?
Mhm.
I know there's talk when we went to the recent training at Hudson Valley, some of the sessions we were in about the state looking at expanding that to like 8 hours or something along those lines.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And I thought, well, 8 hours is kind of awkward because it's hard to do it in a day with breaks and everything. So then there was some discussion that maybe it would be 6 hours, because 6 hours and you could have time for breaks, for a lunch, and still get it all in one day. Because that's what's nice about the 4 hours. You can do it all in one shot,
Yeah. and
It was only
you carry
discussion at
over.
the.
A lot of times when you're required to have 4 hours, you actually get 6 hours when you go for the whole day, and then
Yeah.
you carry 2 over to the
Yeah,
next
for 1 year.
Or if you're trying to cram it in.
I was like, that's a lot of webinars.
So again, I think that's an easy and not controversial one. We all agree with it. So that would be one that we would also group, right?
Unless Alexis, you think that's better as a resolution?
I think it's better as a
Yeah.
solution.
Resolution?
Yeah, because they're easier to change if we want to add more hours or less down the road.
Because that one, you
And that
don't need
doesn't
to put
affect the
so
public.
that one you don't need to put the public on notice for that.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that one could be a resolution.
All right, sounds good. All right, 6, adding definitions for electric vehicles and EV charging stations and the like. And you already had some definitions, right, Laura? that
Yeah,
are-
those. We can pop those back in if you guys want to.
And that was
We were
it.
talking when we did it before, we had mandatory requirements for EV charging stations. And then I think as a middle of the road thing, I put in like consideration of like under our parking requirements, we could do a definition for EV charging station and then just say the planning board shall consider the addition of EV parking spaces during site plan review. And that way it's not triggering some of those concerns that you guys had when we were mandating them, but it does actually put into writing that we're considering them when we're reviewing new parking lots, which we honestly don't have a lot of, but it's not a terrible thing to have in our code.
And I think I don't speak for everybody, it seems reasonable, right? I mean,
This is a little bit out there, but could it actually replace some of the green space requirements we have for ratios?
I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay.
I think it would just be some of the existing parking lots would be dual parking lots either.
Yeah, you probably don't want to increase impervious spaces in order to have EV charging.
No, I mean, if, let's say in exchange for the money exchange for green space, a developer may need to put a parkland somewhere else,
Yeah.
or they could have EV charging stations. I don't want to complicate it, but I'm just thinking the net impact on climate could actually be even more improved with EV parking.
Yeah, as an incentive.
Yes, but we don't have to just, this is an idea that I had, I wanted to run it by the group so that you have it in the back of your mind.
So incentives basically promote the EV charging stations.
Or incentives, yeah,
Yeah.
or ways to
Yeah, I mean-
incorporate.
I mean, like if we have, I don't know, like you said, Laura, there's not a lot out there, but who knows what the future holds, right? So another
Yeah, like
mall, but
yeah.
maybe they redo Mansion Square, for instance. I don't know if there's any charging stations over there. We
There's
may want to have, X number. And again, they're dual purpose. You're not restricted from parking in one, but they'd have to, incur the cost of the infrastructure to put in.
Right, something like that.
But I think that where the world's going, I think they,
Yeah, incentivizing them is a good idea. I'm just
Yeah.
not sure that we'd want to trade green space, but maybe like a reduction in fees or something.
Something, yeah.
Yeah.
So to use
To
that. as a-
incentivize them. So you could say the planning board would consider requiring, would consider EV parking, in site plan reviews. I mean, the planning board does have a lot of power though. You guys could just say, put the EV parking space.
yeah, I'm more
You
along.
don't
We have
have
the
to
power.
trade.
I'm more concerned, I'm concerned if we start saying that we can, what do you call it? Trade off on something. If it's not very clear, then how you want to make sure
True.
you treat every applicant the same, right?
We could put language in there with the incentive,
Yeah.
what that incentive.
But we'd have to define that. And if that's a lot of work to define that, I would say.
For now, we
Let's
could
just-
just put in
let's just
consider
do it.
EV charging stations.
Again,
and then
that's a
yeah.
good, Mr. Flom's
Or
good.
we
No,
could
I'm not trying to
perhaps be
dismiss it.
a little bit broader and just call it clean energy or alternative fuel so that we don't have to go back and every time there's a new.
Clean energy.
Oh, in case it's a hydrogen car or
Yeah.
something along those
Nuclear
lines.
car. or
Yeah,
something.
there we go. Drive
We
it
could
on.
change it to something. I'm not sure that you can say that all EV charging stations are clean energy. That's complicated. But we can look at it so that it's flexible.
Yeah, I mean, you recently had a case where was it that they came in, they were going to
Non-fossil
convert,
fuel.
they were going to convert some of their spots to EV?
Yeah. Well, but essentially an electric vehicle charging station is not necessarily a clean energy charging station. It depends on where you're purchasing the energy from. Like the town could say, I'm going 100% renewable. Our charging stations are clean energy, but electricity by default is not always a clean energy
fossil
thing.
fuel.
So I'm just saying like that's actually a
Yeah.
separated thing, but you might be able to say like alternative.
Fossil.
Well,
waste. Yeah. but-
alternative fuels.
Yeah, I don't know. You could maybe look into
No,
something.
I agree with you there, Laura, but my point wasn't there somebody recently that converted parking spots to EV charging?
Yeah, automated dynamics. And actually we got another one
So-
too.
You can see that
And Glen Eddy, I
people
forgot to
are
send that.
already
Yeah.
going that way, so I think, they're starting to recognize they need them themselves, so.
Which might mean the town doesn't have to be that involved in it, but incentive.
Yeah, I think
But
that
it's times we do. we need-
there's probably a majority of the times that we don't have to get.
So
involved.
that would be a code amendment change and require like that being grouped with the public hearing and so on and so forth. for the-
Yeah, I think that's just simple changes to the parking.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, amend section A 235 appendices are consistent with the, okay, so that's just basically updating
Yeah,
what's
so
already approved and just cleaning up the,
the appendices has different timelines for zoning board cases than our actual zoning code. So we probably want to clarify because sometimes we don't understand if we're supposed to follow the appendices or we're supposed to follow. The timelines are different.
so that's, it seems simple, like, give us the changes. you
It's
know.
simple, but that's actually a lot of words on
It's a
that
lot-
one, but
it's a lot of
that's
words.
okay. It should be done. It causes headaches for the building department.
Number 8, the zoning immunity, which I think you already discussed. So it's basically to capture it within our code so that everybody's aware of it because they won't go to any state codes. That, I guess, the reason for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay leaving it out. I think we just struggle sometimes with zoning immunity, so we could put it in, but it's definitely not required. It's definitely governed by laws outside of our own.
Well, we did zoning immunity for the Verizon tower,
Yeah.
right? And that was because it was a third-party applicant, I believe.
Yeah.
Right? So if the town wanted to put up a similar antenna for use only by the police or fire or whatever, they would have had immunity.
I would think that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
But we might want to know about that and review it because because the aesthetics reasons, all of a sudden there's a tower there, right? And town says, hey, we had immunity, so we didn't have to go to planning, didn't have to, Conservation Advisory Council didn't have to look at it, right? Even though they might look at it and give a recommendation. I would think we'd want to at least know about those things and have whether or not we want to look at it, right? So how do we do that? Was that something that would
Yeah,
be?
I don't even have a draft of this, but I do know that we were struggling with zoning immunity for a couple of projects. So I thought that if we put it into our, and I actually don't think that it's in almost any
Yeah.
other code.
Yeah.
This would be like definitely a new thing.
So that's a tough one then, right? That sounds like it's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, my preference would be we keep it in our minds, but maybe we take that one off the table for now.
Yeah, to take some research and then some kind of a process, right? Whether it maybe just goes to the Conservation Advisory Council for recommendation or something like that, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Temporary COs, building permit amendment, looking at making penalties for expired temporary COs tougher. I mean, seems like if you're running into things, we need to help fix it, right?
Would that be a code change or
I think we probably group it all together, but yeah,
code?
that's a different chapter of the code, but we might as well.
Okay, so code change, and we can group that, all right?
Add solar to the town's code.
Yeah, solar.
So that's one of the, so we allow for roof mounted solar and we treat ground mounted arrays on single family homes as accessory structures. But the attachments that's labeled the town of Dwaynesburg, local law 2016, is a local law that governs siting of large solar farms. So the advantage of having something like that into our code is that,
Yeah, my,
If it's abandoned, we know what to do. We know there's rules around it.
I mean, we did see that Monolith, I don't know what happened to them, but at one point wanted to put that large solar array along the bike path. Yeah, I think we saw it for one meeting and then they disappeared, but there may be interest in taking some currently vacant, forested land and converting it into solar arrays. So I feel like having something that requires pollinator-friendly habitat, requires buffering, requires,
It's a good idea.
maybe like offsetting some of the habitat that is being
Yep.
converted to solar panels. Everybody understands solar panels are great, but there's definitely an environmental impact to siting them on not virgin, but like forested lands.
Yeah, even when we talked to GE, we talked about
Yeah, because-
glare, aesthetics.
Yeah, and Dwaynesburg says like the first thing you do is try and find a place where you don't have to do a lot of clearing. Like, there's a hierarchy of how you review them.
Yep. My question here was that, was local law 2016, did Dwaynesburg actually adopt this? Is it in place now in Dwaynesburg?
I don't know.
So one thing I would suggest is that we contact whoever's over there, see if it's adopted
See
and
if
whether, how it's working, whether they would have made any changes and update this, to reflect whether they have any real life experience with it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, hey, we wish we did this in there and we didn't think of it, and just make sure we got the latest and greatest with any, even if it's on file, the law is filed, if there was something they ran into that we should know about to consider. Because I went through it, it seems pretty good. Why do rework if you got all this available?
I
So
agree.
on setbacks, minimum 25-foot perimeter buffer, I guess I didn't have opinion on setbacks. I know that we got setbacks for what zoning district it may be in, right? So I just want to make sure we had probably the most conservative setback. And I don't know whether or not that's 25 feet or not. Maybe there may be greater restrictions based on where it's sited.
What problem is that 25 feet is actually
What problem is that
short.
trying to address?
I agree with you, Laura. Yeah.
Essentially, it's protection of property values adjacent to the solar array fields.
Okay.
Because if somebody's been living in their home forever and it's been forested behind them, and then, the county comes in and clears all the land and puts solar panels right up to the property line, it's probably pretty damaging to property values.
Yep.
if you have a 25-foot or a 35-foot buffer before those, I actually think you can see through 25 to 35
Yeah, I
foot
think
buffers
that-
pretty easily, but at least there's some protection during the summer
Yep.
of those property values. Nobody's saying that it's not a good idea, but protecting the adjacent properties, from the negative effects of these things is probably important.
Yeah, there's, the good thing is, that you got a neighbor, the solar panels, which isn't gonna, not gonna create noise, right? Not gonna have,
Yeah, I mean,
there's some good things, but you gotta look at it, right?
for instance, they built the solar panels almost right up to the property line in Iroquois Village, and it negatively impacted their ability to rent those apartments that were directly adjacent to that property. The view shed changed completely from the third-story buildings. I mean, I'm not sure that a 25-foot puffer would have done that much, but it would have done a little bit.
Also.
And I got those calls.
You got the calls. Also in there, it says here, the Uniform Code Enforcement Officer of the town. Who would that be for us? That's
What is it?
Page 3, item number 4 on page 3 for the local law for solar here. It says approval is required prior to installing solar energy system.
Oh, ours is just code enforcement officer.
Code Enforcement
Yeah.
Officer. So it'd be, you, Tom, or Ken, right?
Yep. Most loved people in our town.
So I guess my thought here is that we could go through this, and I'll obviously be here, like going through this whole thing line by line, make the phone call, find out, if they have any changes, update this so that the words would match what it would be for the town of Niskayuna versus Dwaynesburg, and then let's get it out for our review, right? Sure. That sound reasonable? And that would be one that would be Groot because this is a major
Yeah,
thing.
I think we can do that in time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not trying to hurry, so if somebody's got something, just interrupt me, please. All
No,
right.
I think you should hurry.
What do you mean you're not trying to? All right, I'm almost there. Where am I?
Please muscle right through.
Accessory structures, this one is a good one, accessory structures, because I think my personal, for me too, I think I could run, so I thought, geez, I could use another garage, So I saw this one, it kind of, because, based on the size of the lot, so, you got, our 80,000 square foot lots, so I think we should take a look at, how many, and I get confused personally on accessory structures, so I think if you have a pool, you require a fence, so that's considered one, right?
Mhm.
So then if you have an attached deck, then that would be 2, right?
No,
No,
not
if it's
attached.
Not attached?
If it's not attached.
But the fence has to
standalone.
be on the apron of the pool in order for it to be considered
Right.
one. If you have a pool and you put the fence around the edge of your property,
So I
that's
think in my lot, I think I have a variance already for a third accessory, because I have a pool with a fence, I got a shed, and I got a detached garage. So I got 3, but it does not impact a lot. The lot's, 80,000 square feet. So I
yeah.
think we need to
Look at it. The zoning board struggles with this one because essentially it limits the square footage on residential lots to the minimum. So if you have like an 80,000 square foot lot, you can only have the same square footage of your accessory structures as a 18,000 square foot lot. So it would be really difficult to fit a large barn on an 18,000 square foot lot. But if you have an 80,000 square foot lot and you want a giant barn, you will go over your lot coverage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the zoning board is always like, why? Do you remember this one, Patrick?
Oh, yeah. What?
They're like, why? Every time that one comes to them, they're like, this is kind of a weird thing in our code.
Yeah, because you got an R2 lot, like somebody who developed over
Yeah.
in Schwaber or whatever, right? They're 9,000 square feet. You don't want somebody coming in.
Yeah,
trying to put it
9,000 is what
down, but if
governs
they-
it.
But if you got R1, but your lot happens to be like Mr. Lisi's proposing 2 acres, they want to put up something reasonable.
Yeah.
Should have that flexibility
That's
without
what
having to
that
go to ZBA. So sounds like, I think it's a good thing, but we need some words to go
So we'll
with
put
it,
the words on that one.
all right?
The se-
Temporary sign sounds easy. We ran into that. I think. the planning-
1769 Union Street. There's no restriction on temporary signs, and they put up a sign the size of.
Oh.
Do you remember that?
Oh, for the medical building.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think.
It was like a plywood structure. It was like it was enormous.
So I'm all for, for having, be able to have the guidance and enforcement. Not because of them, but, future cases, of course, right? So, setbacks, and that's like the dog, whatever you call it, right? The electric fences, is that what number 14 is?
Yeah, 14. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, if we're talking 14 or 13?
Yes, 13
Oh,
is.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. That won't negatively impact existing businesses. That's just a hole in our code.
My question there is what would it be? Because you have like the right of way and then we're encouraging sidewalks, right?
I know. I feel like
So you
what
have
we
to
should
come up with a
do
number that fits all that.
is either go back to an old code and see if there ever was one, and if it was just omission by error, or like take a look at what they are for similar residential districts, and then bring those, like, okay, RP has these setbacks, CS has these setbacks, and CN is somewhere in between RP and CS. So
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Should we be doing that?
So I think we're good with having
okay,
something
and
on the
yeah,
CN.
so we'll
Find
bring you
it.
some kind of guidance if we can on the
Right, and I
setbacks.
think we're also good with the regulations on non-visible fences because we don't want them coming right up to the sidewalk and having a fence there where.
How far though were you talking about?
Yeah, we actually had a lot of discussion about that. Do you guys remember that?
I recall having a discussion.
We talked about like the setbacks, didn't we?
For like, for.
Yes, we
where people
did.
have electric fences, like how far?
Yeah, if there needed to be a setback from the property line, or if it could just be up to the property line.
From how far back from the
Wasn't
property
it
line
4
are we talking
feet?
about?
Were we talking about 4 feet?
You'd have to find
from-
that. I'll bring the code that we had back to you guys.
I don't know, maybe.
I know we did discuss it. There were still some open items. So yes, but we'll take a look at it.
But not in the right of way.
It was definitely not in the
Yeah.
right of way. The question was whether or not it needed to be set back inside the property lines.
Right, and I think the example was you're walking down the street and all of a sudden a German Shepherd's coming at you full head of steam.
Well,
He's not
that's-
gonna stop until he gets like right there at the
Well,
sidewalk, you
that's
know?
because I think the invisible fences, they don't require a building permit right now, and people are installing them in the right of way. So they're essentially installing them up to the sidewalk.
Yeah,
But I think the point was, yeah, that's what you're getting at. There's some places where the sidewalk practically goes right up to the edge of the right of way, like Grand Boulevard maybe.
so we need to
So
basically
then you
need
would
to have a
wanna-
buffer.
Then you would want to have a buffer.
Yep. So we need a recommendation on that.
Okay.
Airbnb, I think that's the one that was included here. It was recently that episode, I guess was in California, where they rented the Airbnb and then there was the party and there was the shooting. It was recently.
Gosh, I did not know that. Stacy already did the research that you asked me to do for Dwaynesburg and said that Elba has updated it and they've got some lesson learned. So we actually have an updated one of this code if you guys are interested.
We have it in the packet, I think.
No.
No,
mine is
no,
not
but yeah,
updated.
there's an updated of that. They went
Did
through
you,
a bunch of
did you
public.
copy
hearings.
everybody on that one?
I didn't. I just shot it over you to be able to get out, but they went through a bunch of public hearings and
So
a
maybe
lot
the
of
final
feedback.
update on that.
So then they have a lot better. I think it cleaned it up a lot more than it.
And I liked their one to begin with, so I feel like I'm okay at least bringing back the North Elba language.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't want,
Days.
there's a lot of work for you guys to reinvent something that people spend a lot of time on if it's adequate, I understand that.
I mean, I think they have a lot more pressure for it than we do, but it's a good way to guide. Yeah.
Yep. And I think Airbnb, as a result of that incident in California, they changed their rental regulations requirements. So people would rent an Airbnb to have a party, in other words.
Well, we did talk about this. Like Airbnb is willing to comply with state and local regulations, and some of the other ones really do not. Like Airbnb is pretty responsive to what municipalities put out, but there's some other apps that just don't care.
Yeah. You get their cut, get their cut.
That's sort
for
of a
getting the
separate
rental, and
problem though.
that's it.
Like we can put it on the code and use it to regulate when we have problems.
So we'll get an updated copy of the Airbnb proposal, right? And that's the Lake Placid one, is that
Yeah.
right? Right? All right. And for this one, the next one is one I guess I have a little bit of, I don't know where I stand. I have a hard time with this one. I'm not, bottom line is, are we okay with having chickens? I guess it would be
Can I-
R1 and R2, right?
Can I actually update this? I was in training in Albany today and a guy stood up in Albany. We had looked at their chicken ordinance before and it never passed. They passed it unanimously. Yeah, like a month ago
In Albany?
in Albany.
That's the one that's attached.
I'm not surprised.
How many,
I
how
put
many
town of
people are
Colony in
asking
there.
for like chicken?
I was just gonna ask,
A
or is
lot.
there a
Hey,
bunch
we
of people?
probably get one once every 3 months. Once every 3.
This hardly is a people beating down the door for chicken.
No, but it is a rather.
You know what
frequent
Albany
request.
did though? Because there was still some concerns is they made it a pilot and they limited the number of essentially like chicken licenses that can go out into Albany. So they're testing it, which is cool.
I kind of like the pilot idea, even if it's a very minimal
Yeah,
amount,
because that way
just
you're
to
like,
see.
okay, I think they limited to 60 chickens. chicken
Permit.
things, and you have to get a permit. Yeah.
With a limit of how many you can have.
And then I think the question is like, will you get up to 60 and there are more people demanding it? Like, what are the issues that are coming with them?
Yeah.
Should we allow more
But if
permits?
there's an issue and you did permit somebody, does that mean they would have to cease operations and stop if it didn't work out?
There's a warning
Yeah, I would think so.
for their situation, I don't know, but I do like the language. It's pretty well defined.
Well, the town of Colony, I think Albany's is very similar. I didn't put Albany's in here because I didn't think it passed, but I found out today that it did.
The only thing I want to ask is, would it apply to R1, R2, and R3s, or just R1 and R2? What's our thoughts?
I would definitely put it in RR.
Oh, that's right, RR.
Because-
But R3 also? That's apartments.
I
right?
wouldn't think so.
Right, so it'd be R1, R2, and RR.
Yeah,
I would say for now, yeah.
for now.
Because, again, R2 being 9,000 square foot
Well,
lots.
maybe that's not fair.
I would think apartments would be a no.
Yeah.
Colony came up with the 48-inch height limit.
No, we could reach out to Colony, or I could go get the Omni one that just passed.
Of the coop,
Well,
it'd be below the
maybe
height of
I'll
the
call
fence.
Farm Vet and see, because to me that sounds ridiculous.
Oh, really?
How do you clean?
I don't know very much about chickens.
Well,
Yeah.
I've been to chickens for a while when I was a little kid. It's a lot of years ago. But we would go in the coop and clean. We'd also harvest the eggs then.
Yeah.
You shoo them out into the pen.
You must be short.
That's really short.
You have to clean the pen sometimes too.
Yeah.
Just one suggestion was made. I wonder if we should bring this matter up to the town board before this gets, we spend any time considering it, just to give them poll the town board.
Just say conceptually, are you okay with, before we spend time here drafting, a perfect proposed amendment to the zoning
Gotta get
ordinance,
shot in the head.
go to them and at least say, or even at committee, economic development
Chickens.
committee,
Yeah,
and say,
that's a good.
should we
Okay, so
put the time and resources in
For
that?
that thing, we'll say bring to committee.
That's excellent.
And I'll find the Omni one.
Today they get slaughtered.
Yeah, with the neck chip.
The issue first came up with the family down on Hillside.
Ever show you?
The town board didn't want to deal with it and hunted the issue to the committee.
Zoning board.
They sent it to comprehensive.
Well, they did send it to comprehensive plan.
And we felt our position was not to set policy on that topic. And we sent it back. And then it's kind of a.
It was decided by the zoning board.
Should make the recommendation if it was the zoning.
Yeah. We currently have a very strong litigated code that does not allow for chickens.
No, right.
We actually made that family get rid of chickens.
Yeah. It's pretty tough on chickens.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like that one, we get some feedback from, I guess that would be the Environmental Development Historic Preservation Committee, right?
Okay, yeah, so for the last item, I'll bring that to EDHP and then report back to you. And if you guys are interested, I'll send you the Albany one and we can compare it to the Colony one.
Right.
That was my
There's a lot of work there
revolution of
for
today.
the planning department and legal. Mr. Henry will be busy. All right. All right, so, and then, resolution when we can, group the other ones together, and we'll move forward, because I think we're, except for the chickens, I think in general, we agree, right?
Be a lot of squawking on that.
We're not trying to rush, I know it's
There are people
important,
who
so.
really, really want them.
that was
No,
the
I know,
first
this
cut.
is a big item too. Sorry, guys.
All right. And last item, I know it's getting late, is the 5G technology
Laura
design
dropped this at the end of
standards,
the-
which is,
Laura, if no one objects, this one, I had encouraged Laura to put this on the agenda, but it really does require a long conversation that I don't think that we'll be able to do tonight. I mean, I can, but I think I'd rather, dedicate our attention to it at the next planning board meeting. And if anybody's interested imminent, like right now, to help me out, we could have discussion about some input on it, but I don't know. If it's
Will
gonna
the
be ready.
timing be okay on that? Will the
It should
timing?
be.
It should be? Okay.
yeah. My only comment was, I took, look it over, and I've talked a little bit about, to Laura and everything, is that, I know, Laura, we're not talking about the details, the aesthetics yet, right? It kind of says it in the statement that we're not, but we are. I know that you had some
I don't
images.
think it should have said we're not. This
Yeah,
is.
I think we need to get those images that you had of the pole, that it contains the hardware within the pole and the antenna
okay.
integrated. Because I think we need to get those out to the board, probably, PDF and an email would be good.
And these are just within the right of ways, right?
This one is just within the right of ways. So add images and prepare for, I'm just letting you guys know that these meetings are not going to get shorter because we're probably expecting Hilltop Van Antwerp to come back in January. So I'm not sure that punting it saves you any time. Fair warning.
Is anybody interested in this topic? Because I am negotiating this right now.
So great comment. So could use a project lead. I know Mr. Khan is in there. I know it's right up his alley, being an
Yeah.
electrical engineer. So you want me to reach out to him and ask him if he
Yeah,
could do
this
that?
isn't
Sure you
just
would want to be
for
project
just
lead.
one agreement. This is just for the right of way, but ideally we're going to have a chapter of the code that's dedicated to the design requirements for all small cell technology in the town, not just within the
So-
right of way.
Does that sound reasonable? Maybe I'll call Jengus and ask him.
I
if he-
think he would appreciate that because he's been watching 5G. We don't have a project lead for Vincenzo.
Right. That was my next.
Patrick's pretending like I'm not looking at him.
Yeah.
I don't think you want me as a project lead on that one.
Yeah.
Although I am a former telecom engineer, so I could take the files.
You could do a
I'll
split.
take the
Do you want
files
to
over
do?
the-
Do
Yeah.
you want to do Mr. Khan and you on
Yeah,
Shinji?
that- yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, and then you could get together with Laura and
You guys are like
Ms.
all
Kim.
notes.
So like I'm thinking like Mike or David. Okay.
Why the 12 month?
Did you volunteer for Vincenzo?
I did.
Thank you. All right. No, it's an important one, obviously, and thanks.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll reach out to Mr. Khan, and it sounds like Chris is on board with also helping Mr. Khan on the 5G and get some images out to everybody so we can know what we're talking about. Bottom line is we want to be able to deploy it with minimal controversy and have it look good and have people happy, which we know is impossible, but anything we can do to help that out, that's the
Yeah.
bottom line.
And so what I would really want you guys looking at, and I'll bring pictures back next time, is the very first page, Exhibit C, has like a hierarchy of how we would cite them. And so essentially the first thing that we would look to cite them on would be existing town property, existing town structures. Like the second thing would be other publicly owned property, then technology districts, then right of way. I mean, so we just want to make sure that we have that hierarchy in
Right.
place.
So
And then we would be avoiding historic districts. Like we don't have historic districts, but we would be maybe trying to avoid.
It means we're gonna have people coming back to about who are, even though we
What is
can't
the
consider it
historic
but people who are concerned about,
Health concerns, yep.
yeah. I mean, I know we can't consider it, but inevitably it brings out people who want us to consider it.
Because 5G still falls under was it 1996 Telecommunications Act? It's still part of that, right?
So, I mean, I think we're having a information session for it at the town board meeting on January 17th. But yeah, we definitely want to be figuring this out if we can.
Yeah.
And we don't have that much time.
So in the older neighborhoods where we have existing poles, hey, that's very helpful.
Put them on existing.
But when we got developments that we purposefully had all the utilities underground, all of a sudden you need to have
A new pole.
a pole in order to mount the 5G, So, aesthetically, if the pole incorporates the antenna and if the associated hardware cabinet, blends in with the pole and it looks okay, that's probably the biggest challenge. People,
It's going to be the biggest.
yeah, that's going to be the biggest challenge.
We don't have a lot of streetlights in this.
Right. Yeah. And if you make them streetlight poles, in order to say, okay, well, we'll add a streetlight and that solves the problem. Now you got a streetlight. Who owns it? Is that a lighting district or does the town assume?
We would give it, so as it stands and in negotiations, Verizon would, if we wanted to, build a street, like a light pole, and we can choose what type we want, the style, the color, and I think they'll pay for it, and then they give it back to the town. So it's.
Well, that is a little complicated because the town doesn't own they are under lighting districts. Like anybody who has light, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the kinds of things that would be the challenge we have to work through. Okay. Anything else about that? And again, I'm not trying to cut it off. It's very important.
Yeah, no, I definitely will come back to planning board. I mean, it's required. We can enter into this agreement unless we have reasonable aesthetic requirements set forth so that their expectations could be geared into how much this is going to cost on their end. So it would be helpful, yeah, if we met a smaller group and then back to the planning board and I'll have more definitive.
With images.
Yeah, with images.
But we'll
These are
meet-
just within right of way that we have. But
Yeah.
We're expecting it will go beyond that at some point, right?
But this master license agreement, the Exhibit C, is just within the Verizon MLA for 5G in the right of ways.
Just right
Yeah.
of ways.
Don't you need more towers than you would for
Does it
4G
suffice?
because of the frequency
There's
length?
very high density.
And it's like each
towers.
block or somewhere
It's pretty
along.
much each block.
Yeah.
Do we know
Sounds-
what percentage of the town's covered just by use of right of way?
No, but we can gear our conversations based on where we think that we're deployed earliest on. And that could be in like, we have a non-disclosure agreement, so we can't get into too much detail with the public and even just with the planning board right now. But if we had a smaller group of us meet, then we could sign some sort of one-off NDA that we could talk in more detail.
Okay, so smaller group meeting at Images and then come back and do
And I'll
the
give Jengis a call, but I mean, you might want to just go ahead and start setting up a meeting because like I said, you don't have a lot of time, do you? Yep. Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything under reports, Laura? Or Ms. Kim?
No. Nope. I was thinking the schedule was under reports, but it's under community
Yep,
business,
yep.
isn't it?
It's under commission business, so why don't we just jump to that then if there's nothing else. So we have the schedule, tentative schedule or proposed schedule for 2020. You know, I didn't have a problem with the dates. I don't know if anybody took a look and saw any conflicts that we need to rectify at all. It's not, yeah, and again,
Committee has first Seder meeting.
Oh, they do?
I believe
In
so.
April? I thought we'll double check.
Yeah, when I looked at it last time, I didn't see any conflicts with Jewish holidays.
We check,
Yeah.
although sometimes we get it wrong.
so was there some on this schedule or you said? Not for us, okay. So we're just going to act on this one tonight and she can take a look at the other one. And if something comes up, yeah, we've modified it before. We'll modify it if we need to.
Yep.
All right, so I didn't have a problem. So let's say all those in favor of approving the Planning Board and Zoning Commission 2020 meeting schedule, please raise your hand if you approve it. All those in favor? Looks like we're all in favor of that. So we'll approve the 2020 schedule. And if something comes up, you know, we can
still change.
we can change it. All right, and then commission business, Mr. Oster, you have anything for us tonight? No?
Nothing.
No? Do you know? Arlen? No?
Nothing.
Mr. Sinfield? Mr. Laflamme?
Oh, actually, yeah, the town in Niskuna now has a climate smart community coordinator. That would be me.
Yeah.
And a task force
Yeah.
with pretty good representation. So if you guys hear or think of anything climate smart associated with the town or good practices elsewhere, you can send them my way.
Great. Yeah, great, and thanks for doing that, Chris.
Yeah, of
We
course.
appreciate that.
Of course.
Mr. Scrivby Tennis? And the only thing I have is happy holidays, and since we won't see everybody,
Oh, yeah.
have a great new year, everyone, into the office. Thanks for your hard work, everybody, throughout the year. And it looks like we're going to have to get our sleeves rolled up at the beginning of the year. We're going to have a lot of stuff ahead of us. All right, anybody else have anything?
Get your sleep.
If not, a motion to adjourn?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Mr. Scrivby Tennis and seconded by Mr. Roster. He's always, I can always go to him, you know? I just got to look at him. And I think that's unanimous that we're adjourned, okay? Thank you, everybody.